class, we were talking about earthquakes. We understood the phenomena behind earthquakes. We spoke about the distribution of earthquakes around the world. And we even covered the impact of earthquakes. Now, let's continue the discussion and let's finish this topic by talking about the management of earthquakes with regard to disaster risk reduction. What measures can we take under disaster management to reduce the risk associated with earthquakes? So let's take a look at this and then we shall proceed to the next disaster. See, first and foremost, as part of pre disaster planning and preparedness, the basic step is risk analysis. Right? We have studied this under every disaster as to how these steps are very similar for disaster management of any hazard. The first basic step in the pre disaster stage is to focus on analyzing the risk. You have to understand what is the risk for your country, which regions are prone, which areas are more vulnerable. So you present this as a hazard vulnerability map. If you guys remember, I showed you the hazard vulnerability map of India yesterday. We understood the seismic zones of the country and how India is divided into different seismic zones based on seismic activity. We understood that Andaman Nicobar Islands, northeast of India, the Himalayan belt, and the Kutch region of Gujarat. These areas fall under Zone 5 and Zone 4, which carry the highest risk with regard to earthquakes. Correct? So when you assess the risk like this and present this through a hazard vulnerability map, it becomes easier to plan for the disaster and prepare accordingly. So based on hazard vulnerability mapping, we can implement land use regulation through zoning standards, and we can regulate and restrict urbanization and as well as industrialization. Yesterday, I explained that the biggest impact of earthquakes is felt on cities and infrastructure because earthquakes primarily threaten buildings, structures, and foundations. So, as a result, cities, industries, and critical infrastructure is the primary concern for us as far as earthquake mitigation is concerned. Now, we can't prevent the disaster, it's beyond human control, but we can at least mitigate the impact through right planning measures. Through right preparedness, we can definitely bring down the losses suffered during earthquakes. One of the best ways to do that, to protect your cities, buildings, and infrastructure, is to strictly implement land use regulation. You regulate how the land is being used for human activities. You come out with zoning standards based on the hazard vulnerability map, and accordingly, you regulate and restrict all kinds of construction activities. You regulate the expansion of cities, you regulate industrialization, you lay down building codes in order to ensure that earthquake resistant and earthquake proof design is included in the architecture of the building. So, as part of the design, as part of the architecture itself, we can implement few engineering solutions through which we can make our buildings and infrastructure earthquake proof or at least earthquake resistant. There have been enough advances in the field of engineering and architecture through which several buildings and even critical infrastructure can be made earthquake resilient and it can be made earthquake proof. This is what countries like Japan have done. Japan, which is highly prone to earthquakes, has implemented building codes and zoning standards very strictly. And as a result, it has built resilience into its cities, into its industries, into its infrastructure. Japan is very strict about these building standards and zoning standards to ensure that the cities and buildings and infrastructure are earthquake proof in the country. So that is how Japan minimizes the impact of these devastating earthquakes. So incorporating the design into the construction and even making old buildings earthquake resistant is the key. Even old buildings and old structures, even they can be retrofitted. Even they can be retrofitted with these design features. That is the advancement we have today in engineering and architecture. It's not just the new buildings and structures which will be built, which can adopt these designs, but even the old buildings, the old facilities and structures, even they can be retrofitted with earthquake proof design and engineering techniques. So this is the primary responsibility of the governments. The national government, the state governments, and especially the local bodies. Because eventually the building codes, zoning standards will be enforced by the local authorities. So local bodies play a very important role, and the national government and the state level governments, they have to provide a broad framework, provide the resources and the financial assistance needed to enforce these strict codes. If you are able to do this, then you can definitely bring down the impact of earthquakes. You can mitigate the impact of the disaster. Is that clear? Retrofitting of critical structures has to be taken up as a priority. For example, power grids, dams, power plants, nuclear plants, then critical government and defense facilities. So such institutions, such facilities have to be a priority when you're retrofitting the old structures and even the new upcoming structures. Now take India's new parliament, for example, and as well as the Bharat Mandapam, which has been inaugurated for hosting key global conferences, including the G20. These new buildings which have come up in India's capital, they incorporate earthquake resistant design because Delhi is highly vulnerable to the impact of earthquakes. It's located in zone 4, and as a result, it experiences frequent high magnitude earthquakes. And even the old structures can be retrofitted to make them earthquake resilient. So the key here is regulation and enforcement at all the levels of the government, the central government, the state governments, and local bodies. They all have to take the responsibility to ensure strict regulation and enforcement. Then comes your other measures like creating public awareness, training the public and communities on how to respond during an earthquake. This is very, very important. The common public should know how to react when the earthquake strikes. As soon as the buildings start shaking, right? People should not panic and they should know the steps that they should follow. Instead of just trying to run out of the building, sometimes it is safer to hide under a strong structure like a table or a bed, which actually protects you from the falling debris, right? So this requires training and awareness amongst the common people, conducting mock drills, using media and social media to spread the message and the guidelines. So every person is aware as to how to respond if an earthquake occurs, especially in seismically active zones. This is a very, very important step. Train people in first aid or ensure that people know where the exits are located, how they can exit the building safely, when they have to hide under strong structures like a table or a bed, which is actually much more safer for the individual instead of trying to run out of a falling building. So such basic training and awareness has to be provided at the community level. You have to build the capacity of your community, of all the concerned authorities, so they know how to respond during these massive earthquakes, especially the disaster response forces like NDRF, SDRF, and even armed forces which are called in to respond. They should have specialized training, specialized equipment, and all the necessary resources to conduct the search and rescue operations. When earthquakes happen, right, there will be large scale devastation. People will be trapped in buildings. Thousands of buildings could have collapsed, right? People will be trapped under all the debris, under all the concrete, iron, steel, and whatnot. So it's not easy to operate in such an environment. It's not easy to identify where the people are trapped or reach those areas and rescue them. It might take many hours or several days as well. So the forces will require the right training, equipment, and resources. They will need heavy earth lifting, earth moving equipment like JCBs, etc., and cranes, etc. They will need gas cutters to cut through concrete and steel to clear the debris and rescue the people. They will need drones, even robots, or even scanners. Thermal scanners are critical, right? If debris has fallen, if entire buildings have collapsed and people are still alive inside, scanners will help you figure out where living people are still present. Thermal imaging can pick up the heat signature, and accordingly, the forces can respond. Canine squads, dog squads are also critical in helping identify the location of the trapped people. So, all such training, equipment, and resources are necessary for the disaster response forces to effectively conduct search and rescue operations. Is that clear? The emergency response has to be as effective as possible. That is where you save thousands and thousands of lives. So, if you are able to put in place these measures and then focus on post disaster reconstruction and recovery, then you will be able to tackle the impact of earthquakes. Since earthquakes deliver serious damage to entire cities, it's very, very important to prioritize reconstruction and recovery. You have to rebuild the damaged infrastructure, help the people to rebuild their homes, help restore livelihoods, restore the economy, provide the connectivity, and restore the infrastructure. These are very, very important tasks to be carried out in the post disaster phase. So, if a question comes up on earthquakes, if you're able to bring out this explanation, this is more than sufficient to help explain disaster risk reduction for earthquakes. Is that clear? We have covered all the stages: pre disaster, during disaster, and post disaster, which completes the disaster management cycle. So, this also completes my discussion on earthquakes. If you guys have any doubts, please let me know. I'll be happy to take questions, because after this, I'll be moving on to the next disaster, which is tsunamis. So please let me know if you have any questions or doubts. What is DRR? Akhil is asking. DRR is disaster risk reduction. Abhishek is asking, why not zone 1 in map? If you're referring to the hazard map over here, right, according to seismologists, there's no point in listing zone 1. Zone 1 is a safe zone. Only those zones which witness any kind of seismic activity, only they are listed in the hazard map. So zone 1 is not even part of a seismic map. It's not even considered, because those are very stable regions. And also, please understand, you can't technically have zone 1. A massive earthquake in a region will affect the entire nearby region. At least the trembling will be felt, the tremors will be felt, right? Especially when aftershocks come after a few hours and few days. The tremors will travel, and almost every part in the region will witness some kind of tremors. So the starting is zone 2 to zone 5. That is the classification, the standard classification. Saqib is asking, sir, uniform codes, I didn't understand. What is uniform code? If you're referring to building code, right? Building code is construction standards, how buildings have to be built, how a structure has to be built? What are the standards to be followed while laying the foundation, while constructing the building? How earthquake resilient design can be incorporated into the architecture of the building, right? That is what you mean by building codes. Vaishna is asking, what is the role of civil mechanical engineers in pre-disaster cycle? As I explained, civil engineers, architects play a critical role in mitigating the impact of earthquakes because they are the ones who design and build buildings and structures, right? So they have to incorporate these standards to make all structures earthquake proof and resilient. Sri Devi is asking, sir, can we write sinkhole as an example for earthquake? See, please understand, sinkhole is not an earthquake. Sinkhole is a phenomena where a part of the earth's surface sinks because of various reasons, due to land subsidence, due to heavy water percolation, which has weakened the soil structure. Part of the soil and the surface will collapse, right? Creating a massive sinkhole. But sinkhole is not exactly a major disaster. These are small incidents which happen in given local areas. It will not have a huge impact across cities, across countries. So sinkhole is not an earthquake. It's not related to tectonic activity. Surveer is asking, highest scale of earthquake for destroying everything. 9 plus magnitude earthquakes. They have the potential to flatten entire cities and entire regions. So anything 9 and above can be extremely, extremely devastating. Ravi is asking, sir, why can't the government make compulsory rules to make earthquake resistant buildings in earthquake prone areas? See, the government has made the rules. Problem is in enforcement. I hope you know that when it comes to building, construction, creating layouts, building apartments, malls, etc., all the regulation is under the hands of the local bodies, right? The building codes and enforcing the zoning standards is with local authorities. Problem is in enforcement, there is a huge gap. There is rampant corruption in our local bodies, which involves political parties, state and central governments as well, where they bypass the rules and they allow such construction to take place, even though we have building codes and standards. Is that clear? There is a nexus between politicians, government officials, and the real estate mafia and the construction mafia. So they bypass all the rules by paying bribes and get the permissions and they go ahead with the construction. So what we are lacking is enforcement. Strict enforcement is necessary. So we have to tackle corruption at the grassroots to prevent this from happening. Santosh is asking, sir, a few years back, an earthquake in Nepal caused shaking in Delhi as well. How is it connected, sir? See, obviously, the Earth's surface is all connected, right? Tectonic plates, when they go through the fracture and the faults, the tremors will spread across the region, right? The disasters, they don't respect international boundaries. International boundaries are imaginary boundaries that we have drawn. So, an earthquake in China can cause tremors in India as well. A massive earthquake in Indonesia can cause tremors in India, right? Because of the structure and nature of the Earth's structure, the interior of the Earth structure. Anu is asking, what makes tectonic plates move? Tectonic plates are sitting on molten magma, right? At the center of the Earth, towards from the center, the core towards the mantle, you still have hot fluids which still haven't cooled down. And the plates which are sitting on these fluids will obviously tend to move. Labdi is asking, is it mandatory for all construction to be earthquake resistant? Yes, obviously. If you have to protect buildings and save lives, every building has to be earthquake resistant. Once you build a strong foundation, right, and ensure that the overall structure, the pillars, the beams are strong enough, then even slightly higher magnitude earthquakes will not cause much damage to the buildings. Akhil is asking, do earthquakes in seas have any impact? Yes, earthquakes happening under seas, right? Even they have a devastating impact because they cause tsunamis, which is the next topic. Nikhil is asking, sir, how much magnitude earthquake has been witnessed in India till now? India has witnessed 7 and 8 plus magnitude earthquakes. Okay. So now let's move to the next topic, which is tsunami. Tsunami is also a geophysical hazard that is linked with earthquakes, volcanoes, and underwater landslides. It's essentially a result of geophysical phenomena which is triggering the tsunami, right? See, tsunami is basically a massive wave that crashes into the coastline. So you might think it's a hydrological phenomena, but it's not, because the primary trigger for a tsunami wave to occur is either an earthquake or a volcano and few other reasons. So tsunami is classified as a geophysical hazard because it is caused by the geophysical movement which is happening inside the earth. All right. So how do you define a tsunami? A tsunami is a massive wave or a series of very long wavelength waves that form in seas, oceans, and lakes as well, that can strike the banks on the coastline, causing massive destruction because of the displacement of water. Is that clear? Tsunami can happen even in a large lake as well, in any water body. As I told you the other day, you take a big bucket. Imagine the bucket is filled with water. You drop something into it. Let's say you drop a huge stone inside the bucket. Obviously, the water will spill out, right? It's pretty much the same phenomena which happens in case of a tsunami. So essentially, tsunami is a series of long wavelength waves generated in these water bodies that gains height. It gains tremendous height. They can reach 12, 15 feet in height when they get closer to the bank and the coastline. And when they strike the coastline or the banks, they can cause extensive damage along the coastline and also trigger coastal flooding. So this kind of hazard is called a tsunami. So let's understand what causes a tsunami, and also let's talk about the phenomena involved in the formation of tsunami waves. Now, if you look at this diagram given here, this infographic, most of the tsunamis that we have experienced in the last few centuries, they have been triggered by earthquakes. Underwater earthquakes are the primary reason responsible for triggering a tsunami. The best example, the best case study would be the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami. I'm sure all of you would have heard about it. Some of you would have experienced it as well. The 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami happens to be one of the biggest tsunamis we have witnessed in several decades. This tsunami was triggered by a massive earthquake that occurred at Sumatra in Indonesia. Where is Sumatra located? Sumatra is the northernmost island of Indonesia, located very close to our Andaman Nicobar Islands. So, near Sumatra, under the Indian Ocean, there was a huge earthquake that happened that triggered the tsunami wave that caused massive devastation across Indian Ocean. The tsunami wave hit Indonesia, Thailand, Myanmar, Bangladesh, India, right? Especially Tamil Nadu took the biggest impact. In India, more than 1 lakh people were killed during this tsunami. Then even Sri Lanka, Maldives, and East African countries, as far away as Somalia and others, right? They all took the impact of the 2004 tsunami. So majority of tsunamis are caused by underwater earthquakes, nearly 75% of it. The next reason would be landslides. landslides that happen underwater, or also landslides that happen along coastlines. Because see, the seabed is not a flat plain area. On the seabed also you have a topography, you have a terrain. There are mountains underwater as well on the seabed. Is that clear? Please understand this. The terrain of the sea floor is not flat. Just like we have topography and terrain on earth, similarly you have mountains, valleys, trenches underwater as well. So in these underwater mountains, the mountain structure might collapse, it might break and cause an underwater landslide. So this sudden movement of rock material underwater can also push the water up, triggering the tsunami wave that crashes into the coastline. The other possibility is, imagine a coastline where there are cliffs and mountains. For example, if you look at United Kingdom, Australia, even the Californian coast, right? You have these mountains present on the coastline itself. So if part of the mountain crashes and collapses into the sea or the ocean, even that can trigger a tsunami wave. All right, so underwater landslides or land-based landslides, both can trigger tsunamis. Then volcanic eruptions. Volcanic eruptions happening on land and also underwater. There can be underwater volcanic eruptions, or even on land near coastline or near the sea. If there is a massive volcanic eruption and if all the lava magma rushes into the sea or the ocean, even this can push a tsunami wave. Next, there is an extraterrestrial reason. From outer space, there can be a hazard, which is the strike of a meteorite or an asteroid or a comet into the Earth's seas and oceans. If a large enough meteorite were to impact our seas and oceans, right, it will generate massive energy, which transfers into the seas and the oceans and thus triggers a huge tsunami wave. And there are few other unknown causes as well. In certain cases of tsunami waves, we have not been able to determine what exactly caused the tsunami. Was it an earthquake? Was it a volcano? So some are categorized as unknown causes. So these are the natural causes contributing to tsunamis. Is that clear? These are the natural causes. Now, can you guys tell me, is it possible to witness a man-made tsunami? Is it theoretically, practically possible? Yes or no? Some are saying yes, few are saying no. The correct answer is yes. Man-made tsunamis are also possible, but of course it will not be of the same impact. Underwater nuclear testing. Underwater nuclear testing can cause a minor tsunami. The energy released through a nuclear explosion can trigger the long wavelength waves under the sea or the ocean, which strikes the coastline. But of course, the impact will be very less. It will not be comparable to a natural tsunami. Is that clear? Or any underwater explosion, even in a lake, right, can cause a tsunami. Is that clear? So there are possibilities where a man-made tsunami can occur as well. So please make a note of the contributing factors. There are natural causes and few man-made causes as well. Now, which regions in the world experience the most number of tsunamis? Which are the most vulnerable? Along the fault lines of Chile, Nicaragua, Mexico, Indonesia, and as well as Japan. These are the most vulnerable. Certain locations along the Pacific Ring of Fire, right, where you have the most earthquakes and volcanoes present. And also few along the transatlantic ridge and as well as along the Indian Ocean ridge. These earthquakes or even volcanoes that might happen or underwater landslides that might happen can trigger these killer tsunami waves that strikes these countries. Even Philippines is at risk. India, Sri Lanka, Maldives, then Thailand. You can even add Bangladesh, Myanmar as well to the list. All right. Even United States, South Pacific Islands. So there are many countries which have experienced killer tsunami waves, but the most vulnerable are Chile, Nicaragua, Mexico, Indonesia, Japan, and the others. So according to available data, most of the tsunamis have occurred in the Pacific. Almost 790 plus have occurred in the last 3 decades itself. It's a very important fact for your prelims. Even if you don't remember the number of tsunamis that have occurred in the Pacific, just remember this factoid that Pacific Ocean has witnessed the most number of tsunamis since 1990. The statement can be given in a prelims question. All right. So clearly, Pacific Ring of Fire is responsible for most of these killer tsunami waves. Now let's understand the phenomena involved in generation of tsunami wave and the eventual strike of the tsunami wave. There's a process involved, there's a phenomena. You need to understand those mechanics. Let's understand how this energy travels through the seas and the oceans, how it transfers into the water, and how it eventually causes a tsunami wave. Now look at the first picture here, the first image. It is depicting a underwater hazard. It's depicting the rupture of tectonic plates along the fault line that has caused a massive underwater earthquake. Similarly, there can be any other reason, as we discussed. There could be a volcanic eruption here, there could be a nuclear explosion, or an underwater landslide. So, any such reason which releases massive energy underwater can trigger the tsunami wave. Now, this energy which has been released, this massive amount of energy, it will transfer to the water itself, and of course, the energy starts traveling. It starts traveling in the form of waves. Is that clear? The energy which was released by this event transfers to the water body and travels as waves, which we call as a tsunami wave. Initially, in the deep seas and deep oceans, the tsunami wave will have a very long wavelength and short amplitude. Now, what do you mean by this? It means that the wavelength, the distance between the crest and the trough of the wave will be very, very long. It can be hundreds of kilometers. The wavelength is so long that you can't even detect if a tsunami wave has been generated, even if you're present at that site traveling on a ship. Imagine there is a ship present here where a tsunami wave has been generated in the deep seas and oceans. Because of the long wavelength, since the amplitude is very less, the height of the wave is very less, it's very short, but the wavelength is very long, and the energy is simply traveling below. Underwater, the waves are traveling below. So a ship on the surface will not feel anything. Even if a massive tsunami wave is passing below, the ship will not experience any impact because of the short amplitude. The wave has not gained height. It simply has a long wavelength and it's traveling at a tremendous speed, almost at 700 kilometers per hour. That is the speed at which tsunami waves can travel. It's almost as fast as a civilian commercial aircraft. All right. And the wavelength can be very, very long, 200, 300 kilometers. The distance between the high and the low, the crest and the trough, could be as long as 200, 300 kilometers. So as a result, if you were to be here, you will not even experience the tsunami wave. The wave is traveling below without making any impact because of its short amplitude. But as the waves enter the coastal area, as they get closer to the coastline, right? This is where the wave hits an obstruction. As it gets closer to the land mass, the continental land mass, right? the wave is all of a sudden being brought to a stop because the wave is encountering the landmass. It's not able to travel forward anymore. Now, what will happen? It's like a fast moving car and you have suddenly applied brakes on it, right? So, obviously, there is a reaction to that. When the waves get closer to the coastline, when they enter shallow waters, when they get closer to the continental landmass, the wave faces an obstruction. It's all of a sudden being brought to a halt. So obviously, the wave will start gaining amplitude. It will gain height and the wavelength reduces. The wavelength reduces. The wavelength undergoes a compression because of the sudden halt, and it starts gaining in height. It can start gaining height and reach anywhere between 4 feet to 12 feet to even 15 feet. Some tsunamis which are minor, they will attain a maximum height of just 2, 3, or 4 feet. They will have a very minimal impact. But killer tsunamis which cross 10 feet, which can hit 12, 15 feet, these waves which crash on the coastline, they cause the maximum damage. And it's not just one wave, there will be a series of waves. At least 3 to 4 waves will strike the coastline in back to back succession. That is going to flood the coastline and the coastal areas, causing massive devastation. Imagine a wall of water with a height of 10, 15 feet crashing into the coastal area, right? That force itself will destroy everything in the immediate reach of the coastline. If there are buildings, villages, resorts, hotels present, they will be wiped out by the tsunami, by the first wave itself. Then the other shorter waves that come in will flood the water inside, and for several kilometers inland, there will be massive coastal flooding. The sea water will gush into the coastal area. Anywhere between 5 to 10 kilometers inland can get flooded, and it is this flooding along with the crash of the wave which causes the damage, and that is where people get killed. That is where infrastructure can get destroyed. Is that clear? So tsunamis are a major threat to coastal cities, to coastal villages, and to any kind of coastal infrastructure which is present, be it seaports, airports, power plants, naval bases, space stations, that is launching stations like Sriharikota of India, the launch facilities. Any such critical facility faces the full impact of these powerful tsunami waves. Is that clear? Cities can get completely flooded. Coastal villages will be wiped out. Fishermen, fishing villages will take the hit. Boats will be completely destroyed. Coastal infrastructure will suffer severe damage, and particularly tourism takes a hit. The tourists, hotels, resorts, they could all be wiped away because usually at beach destinations, hotels, resorts are present right on the beach. Is that clear? So tsunami waves can completely wipe out the tourist infrastructure and also threatens the lives of tourists and the facilities that are present. So that is the reason why tsunamis are extremely dangerous. Is that clear? But today, thanks to advances in technology, we can detect the generation of a tsunami wave in real time. Today, we have enough technology available, both underwater, in space, and also on land. And through a network of these sensors, we can detect the generation of a tsunami wave underwater as soon as the event happens. Real-time detection is possible, and we can track the movement of the wave. Is that clear? We can not only detect these underwater events with great accuracy, we can even track the movement of the wave and estimate the speed, the direction, and its time of arrival. We can give the ETA as well, the estimated time of arrival, and accordingly, a real time alert or a warning can be issued in the coastal areas. Is that clear? So, India did not have any tsunami early warning system before 2004. That is why we were completely unaware. After the earthquake happened at Sumatra, right, the tsunami wave had been immediately generated. But Indian authorities, Indian institutions weren't aware of the tsunami wave that was traveling. Because you do get plenty of time. You get at least few minutes, maybe 1 hour or slightly more than that, depending on how the wave is traveling, right? So that window is enough to alert the people and the authorities and carry out a quick evacuation. But India was not aware of such risks. We weren't prepared. We didn't have any early warning system. And without notice, the massive tsunami hit Andaman Nicobar, Tamil Nadu, and other parts of east coast of India and even Kerala, causing massive devastation in India. Even Sri Lanka took massive hit. Is that clear? But after this experience, after learning this lesson, India has put in place a very effective tsunami early warning system. In fact, today India has one of the most sophisticated early warning systems in the world, which is comparable with that of Japan and US. These three countries have built this capability. United States, Japan, and India, and few others. Even European powers and Australia, even they have the technology that they can deploy to detect tsunamis and track tsunamis in real time. But India, Japan, and US play a critical role with regard to these hazards in the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. All right, we have deployed these floating BOs, these floating devices that you see here. It's called a BO, which is floating in the sea. It's basically a network of sensors that are deployed all across the Indian Ocean, in Bay of Bengal, Arabian Sea, and across the Indian Ocean to detect the generation of a tsunami wave. Even underwater, on the seabed, network of sensors have been created to detect underwater earthquakes, volcanoes, and landslides. So these sensors will relay the data to satellites in orbit. Even satellites have the ability to track the creation and the movement of the tsunami wave, and the data can be relayed to the command centers, based on which real-time alerts can be issued to all the concerned stakeholders. Is that clear? So today we are in a much better position to tackle the threat of tsunamis because of the early warning system that we have put in place. So if you look at the impact of tsunami, it's quite extensive. There will be large-scale loss of lives, severe damage to infrastructure, as I pointed out, degradation of natural resources, mangroves, coastal wetlands, coral reefs. They all suffer extensive damage during a tsunami. Is that clear? Coral reefs could be destroyed. So marine life also takes a hit. Coastal wetlands will become flooded with saline water and also with debris and waste that the sea brings inside. Your lagoons, estuaries, backwaters, such coastal wetlands will be flooded with the sea water, right? And brings a lot of debris and waste as well, causing pollution, bringing toxicity, and changes the balance in that ecosystem. Mangroves will take the hit. Mangrove forests and tree cover is extremely crucial as a natural buffer against tsunamis. Remember, I had explained this under cyclones. While talking about cyclones, I had already covered this point. How mangrove forests and tree cover along the coastline acts as a natural barrier which cuts off the high-speed winds coming during cyclones and the flood water coming during a cyclone. Similarly, the speed and strength of a tsunami wave can be cut quite extensively by mangrove forests and tree cover. Is that clear? Studies have shown that a well conserved and well protected mangrove cover can break the tsunami intensity by 25 to 30%. Even though they get affected, they take the hit, they protect villages and cities, and thus they act as a critical natural buffer. This is a key lesson India learned during the 2004 tsunami. We never cared about mangrove conservation protection before 2004. There was large-scale destruction of mangrove forests in Andaman Nicobar, in Tamil Nadu, and along the east coast of India. That is why the damage was more extensive on India. So following the 2004 tsunami, the government of India, the Environment Ministry, and as well as the National Disaster Management Authority, they have worked very proactively in the last 20 odd years, along with state governments and other local authorities and local villages and fishing communities, to conserve and protect the mangrove cover in the country. Today, India has increased its mangrove cover because of these efforts in the last 20 years. Is that clear? The Manmohan Singh government, which brought out the Disaster Management Act, started acting on this immediately and prioritized mangrove conservation and protection. The coastal states also responded. And now the Modi government also has launched few new initiatives to conserve and protect the mangrove cover. So because of all these efforts in the last 20 years, the mangrove cover along our coastline has increased. And this is a natural protection, a natural buffer against the impact of tsunamis and cyclones. So there will be extensive loss of livelihood for farmers and fishermen. Because as I told you, fishing villages will be destroyed. Fishing vessels and boats will be completely damaged. Agricultural fields, they will be flooded with seawater. So as a result, farmers and fishermen take the biggest impact. All right. And of course, there is a huge ecological cost, which I just explained. Clear? But we have to pay attention to the damage that is caused to critical infrastructure, especially sensitive facilities like nuclear plants, naval bases, power plants, power grids, and even railway infrastructure, road and railway infrastructure, mobile internet connectivity, right? Or any other critical infrastructure present along the coastline. It's very important to protect them, and especially nuclear plants deserve more attention because the world learnt a very, very important lesson in 2011 during the Fukushima disaster in Japan. I had explained this in a previous class as well as to what happened at Fukushima in 2011. Right? There was a massive underwater earthquake in Japan, near Japan, that triggered a tsunami. And the tsunami wave hit the Fukushima nuclear power plant that affected the power supply. Right? Even the backup power supplies were taken out by the tsunami wave, which hit the Fukushima power plant. And this caused melting of the nuclear core, causing a radiation leakage, and it turned into a nuclear disaster. In the last 3 decades, the Fukushima tragedy is the biggest nuclear disaster we have seen. All right. Even today, the region here is contaminated with radioactive material and radiation. Japan still faces the impact of it. And in fact, that is what pushed Japan to consider a path away from nuclear energy. Even before Fukushima, Japan was debating on the issue of nuclear energy and the risks associated with it. But Fukushima disaster made it clear to Japan that nuclear technology is extremely dangerous, not just for weapons development, but even for civilian energy, that is electricity. So like Germany, Japan also is trying to move away from nuclear energy. Germany has already shut down all its nuclear plants. Japan also is considering that following its experience during the Fukushima disaster. So India has to pay attention to this. Why? Because we have a couple of important nuclear facilities located on the coastline. One is Kalpakkam and the other is in Kudankulam. Both are in Tamil Nadu. So along the east coast of India, where the highest vulnerability is present, we have 2 major nuclear plants, nuclear facilities, that is Kalpakkam and Kudankulam. Kundankulam is a civilian reactor for electricity generation, which is we are building with Russia's help. Kalpakam is a research reactor, which is involved in both civilian program and the military program of India. So protecting these facilities, safeguarding them against the impact of tsunamis is extremely important. Is that clear? So please look at the map, the vulnerability map of India. The entire east coast and even parts of west coast are prone to the impact of tsunamis. Historically, Arabian Sea also has witnessed tsunamis. There are records going back to 1800s and even before that that documents tsunami waves that have hit Maharashtra, Karnataka and Goa. This is centuries ago. So there is evidence to show that even west coast of India is slightly vulnerable. All right? In the past few centuries, tsunamis have hit west coast of the Indian subcontinent. But east coast is more vulnerable because of the Pacific Ring of Fire which passes next to it. Because of the vulnerability of Indonesia and Andaman Nicobar for earthquakes and volcanoes, any massive underwater event in this region, right, near Andaman, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Singapore, this underwater event could be an earthquake or a major landslide or a volcano, can trigger a massive tsunami that will strike the east coast of India. So please note down India's vulnerability. Even the west coast is vulnerable. There is historical evidence to show that, but east coast is more vulnerable. Now, what do we do under disaster management? What steps can we take to reduce the disaster risk? How do we mitigate the impact? We can't prevent tsunamis. It's impossible. It's beyond human control. Right? If a tsunami wave is generated, it is going to strike the coastline. So only thing we can do is prepare, plan, and mitigate or reduce the impact. So for that, we have to reduce the risk, reduce the vulnerability, reduce the exposure. So the first basic step is a effective, reliable early warning system. As I told you earlier, India has done this successfully through INCOIS. INCOIS is a scientific institution based out of Hyderabad that deals with oceanic studies. INCOIS Hyderabad deals with oceanic studies and oceanic information. So this institution has established a working, efficient, and reliable tsunami early warning system in 2007. This has been scaled up from then, and it has become a very reliable early warning system. So INCOIS is the nodal agency for tsunamis to detect tsunamis and provide early warning for tsunamis. So INCOIS maintains a real-time network of seismic stations all along the Indian Ocean, on the seabed, right, in the Bay of Bengal, Arabian Sea, and across the Indian Ocean. And it has also installed tidal gauges to measure the tides. It has deployed these buoys, which we saw in the picture, that transmits the data to satellites, to India's satellites. Even satellites can track the movement of the tsunami wave, and all the information is relayed in real time to a command control center. So INCOIS will immediately issue real-time alerts for the entire stretch of Indian Ocean, especially the northern Indian Ocean. All right, in Bay of Bengal, Arabian Sea, any tsunami can be detected by INCOIS and real-time alerts will be issued. The Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission of UNESCO, it has recognized the Indian Tsunami Early Warning Center as the alert provider for 28 Indian Ocean countries. Please remember this point again, very, very important. This system will not only help India, it will help almost all the countries in the Indian Ocean. So India's tsunami early warning system has been recognized as the nodal agency to give alerts for 28 Indian Ocean rim countries because they don't have the facilities and the technology. So the Intergovernmental Oceanographic Commission of UNESCO has designated the Indian Tsunami Early Warning Center as the nodal early warning agency for the Indian Ocean, stretching from Indonesia to Australia to West Asia to East Africa. Is that clear? So, tsunami early warning system is a critical step because once the alerts are sounded, it will help in immediate evacuation of the people. Since we can estimate the time and the place of arrival of the tsunami wave, across that entire coastline, immediate alerts can be sent. If you have sirens and hooters installed, right, they can all go off simultaneously, thus sending out an immediate warning to the coastal areas. You can also send a SMS blast, automated SMS blast, to all the mobile phones that are active in the region, right? Then all the concerned authorities can be alerted in real time. The local, district, and village level authorities, state level authorities, and all the authorities of the central government. All concerned institutions will get a real time alert, from Indian Navy to Coast Guard to the NDMA, Cabinet Secretariat, Prime Minister's Office, right? The Chief Minister's Office, State Disaster Management Authority, NDRF and SDRF. They all get the real time alert along with the district administration and village level local bodies. And the most important step here is their training and awareness. Before the disaster can happen, right, you should train all the concerned institutions on how to react, how to respond. Once the alert goes off, they should know how to mobilize the people, how to encourage them, push them away from the coastline and take them into the shelters, which is essentially nothing but the cyclone shelters which we have already built along the east coast of India. Since east coast is highly prone to cyclones as well, there are cyclone shelters which have been built. The same facilities can help during tsunamis to shelter the people. At least in the 5-kilometer vicinity of the coastline, that is the minimum threshold, right? At least in the 5-kilometer range, you have to evacuate all the people. Is that clear? So the authorities have to be trained, the district administration, the police, they should know how to react, how to respond. And the people should also be made aware through mock drills and training exercises. Once the sirens and hooters go off, or once they get the SMS, they should know what to do. People have to leave everything behind and run immediately, right? You can even train the hotels and resorts to evacuate the tourists. So every stakeholder has a responsibility to act immediately once the alert is sounded. Then, of course, you protect and conserve your natural buffers. You protect the mangrove cover, the tree cover. Land use planning, that is CRZ guidelines, and its enforcement will be critical in implementing the zoning standards. The coastal regulation zone guidelines brought out by the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. It will restrict, regulate construction activities and human activities. So thus, it ensures the lesser presence of people near the coastline and automatically minimizes the threat. You can even create structural barriers. You can take up structural measures, at least at sensitive locations. You can build embankments, retention walls, and barriers. And Japan has done this quite effectively. Now, let's say there is a seaport or an airport or a nuclear power plant or a naval base. Such critical installations can be protected through these barriers and structures which can be built that can retain the region and push the water back or hold the water or distribute the water, which protects these critical facilities. Japan has actually done quite well in this regard. So India can learn from that. Even we have critical sites located on the east coast, and we can also take up these structural measures to protect some important locations. Even along coastal cities like Chennai, right? Embankments, barriers, and retention walls can be built to minimize the impact of the tsunami wave. So tsunami shelters We already spoke about it. Our cyclone shelters turn as tsunami shelters as well. And in the post disaster, the affected people should get some insurance and compensation so that the risk can be transferred. Since livelihoods will be uprooted, right? A lot of people could get killed. Farmers, fishermen will take the biggest impact, right? Their financial risk has to be transferred through insurance and compensation. This will be a very important post disaster step. All right, to help in recovery, transferring the financial risk is important through insurance and compensation. And of course, the government should also focus on reconstruction of infrastructure. Critical infrastructure which could be damaged should be rebuilt by the government as quickly as possible in order to bring some normalcy back to the affected region. So these are the basic steps that have to be taken under disaster management to reduce the disaster risk associated with tsunamis. Is that clear? So this completes my detailed discussion of tsunamis as well. So now we are left with very few topics under types of disasters. We have epidemics. We'll also look at forest fires. And I'll also talk about lightning, why India has not recognized lightning as a disaster. All right. Then we will also have a small discussion on man-made disasters. These are the few topics we have for today, which will complete this entire module. And we will be heading towards the last part of our discussion. So if you have any questions, do bring it up. I'll try to take 3-4 questions. And then I'll start with the next disaster. We'll talk about a biological hazard, that is epidemics and pandemics. Anushka is asking, sir, what is the biggest wave in tsunami? As I told you, tsunami waves can reach up to 12 feet to 15 feet in height. Anu is asking, INCOIS comes under which ministry? Ministry of Earth Sciences. Nikhil is asking, can we mention tsunami as a secondary hazard? Yes, because a primary hazard is triggering tsunami, right? For example, earthquake or volcano, which are primary hazards, they are triggering the tsunami. So tsunami becomes a secondary hazard. Santosh is asking, sir, does every tsunami wave, will it have the same characteristics of long wavelength and short amplitude in mid-ocean or mid-sea? Yes. Any tsunami wave will have long wavelength and short amplitude when it's in the mid-sea. But as it gets closer to the coastline, wavelength will reduce and it will grow in height. In inland, tsunami is possible. As I told you, in a lake, a tsunami is possible. Imagine there is a large water body, a lake, and there is a mountain next to it. And there is a sudden landslide. A huge piece of rock slipped and fell into the lake. So that force will trigger a tsunami wave in that inland water body, which crashes the wave into the bank and causes the same kind of damage. The phenomena, the process involved is the same. Rashmi is asking, does NDRF, SDRF come for evacuating people? Yes, that is their job. NDRF and SDRF are response forces. When there is a disaster, these disaster response forces, they respond and they evacuate people through search and rescue operations. Labdi is asking, how far is it justified to ask fishermen to pay premium for insurance? See, we are not asking fishermen to pay. The government can come out with an insurance model. I explained this point in previous classes as well. When it comes to disasters, private insurance companies, they don't recognize disasters. They treat disasters as an act of God. They don't provide insurance to that. But governments can work with insurance companies, or maybe government itself can create a insurance scheme where it contributes to premium on behalf of the people, right? People may not be able to afford the premium. Government can contribute. Like government has insurance for farmers. Government has insurance for healthcare. Similarly, government can create an insurance scheme or a policy by working with the private insurance industry and create a product which provides immediate compensation to the affected people. Sahil says LIC. Yes, like LIC. LIC can come out with such a product, but government has to take the initiative. Anushka is asking, can aftershock generate a tsunami? If the aftershock is strong enough, then yes. If aftershock is also of a higher magnitude, let's say 5 or 6 or 7 magnitude, even aftershocks can generate tsunami. Vipul is asking, why don't we make separate institutions under NDMA for quick response? We have made it. That's why you have NDRF under the NDMA. You will study this in the next chapter. Tomorrow, when we come to the last topic, we will study about NDMA, the structure, what India has done to deal with disasters. We have plenty of institutions to deal with disasters, and we have done quite a good job. Femina is asking, sir, why most nuclear plants are located near coastal areas? That's because nuclear plants require a lot of water for cooling solutions and also to let out the wastewater. That is one reason why usually nuclear plants are located near coastal areas. And also, the risk can be reduced. Now, imagine if, let's say, a nuclear accident were to happen, right? At least on one side, there is no human habitation. In case of a nuclear accident, the impact on people can be reduced by evacuating people on the other side who are living on land near the nuclear plant. Other side is pretty safe, at least for humans, because the other side is completely sea. So to reduce the risk of nuclear accident during such disasters, nuclear plants are usually placed near coastal areas. Jansi Rani is asking, can earthquake inland cause a tsunami? No. Earthquake inland cannot cause tsunami waves because in a lake, right? Earthquakes which happen, they happen on a very large scale. So an earthquake cannot trigger a tsunami in a lake. Earthquake can trigger tsunamis in undersea or underwater, under ocean conditions, not in a lake. Shivam is asking why the entire northeast region is prone to higher earthquakes. Because the northeast region is part of the Himalayan, lower Himalayan belt. And as the Indian plate is diving under the Eurasian plate, the whole Himalayan belt is sensitive. And also the Meghalayan plateau has been uplifted. And its stability is linked with the tectonic plates, which is the Indian plate and the Eurasian plate. So any fault line rupture between the Indian and Eurasian plate will cause destabilization of the Meghalayan plate and the surrounding northeast region as well. That's why northeast region is very vulnerable to earthquakes. Anurag is raising a good point. He says in suburban Mumbai, urban buildings are being built in my locality. I think Anurag is from Mumbai itself. He's saying that there are buildings coming up in his own locality, which is resulting in destruction of mangroves. Won't it pose a risk for flooding? You're absolutely right, Anurag. Mumbai actually has a very good mangrove cover, but of late, the expansion of Mumbai and especially suburban Mumbai is leading to a lot of destruction of mangrove cover, right? A lot of residential buildings, apartments are coming up, which pose a threat to mangrove cover of Mumbai, and there are other projects planned as well, which threatens the mangrove cover. So protecting the mangrove cover is important as a shield against cyclones, floods, and tsunamis. Okay. So now let's move on to the next topic. Let's look at the next hazard, which is epidemics and pandemics. So, an epidemic or a pandemic is a biohazard. It's a biological hazard caused by biological agents. Now, the topic becomes all the more important because the world has just gone through a deadly pandemic. The last 3 years, right? There's not a single human being on earth who has not been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. So, this unprecedented disaster that the world witnessed was a biological hazard caused by a bioagent. So, let's understand what are epidemics and pandemics, what's the nature of this disaster, what causes it, and how do you deal with it? Because we have to draw lessons from COVID 19. There were plenty of mistakes made by several governments and international organizations when it came to COVID 19. So we need to draw lessons from there. Even India made several mistakes. We have to draw lessons, learn from this experience, and incorporate the lessons so that we can deal much better with future epidemics and pandemics. You can't rule out that it will not happen again. Epidemic and pandemics can happen at any point of time, right? And in fact, the risk is more in the future. In the coming years, the risk of deadly epidemics and pandemics is only going to increase because of climate change and global warming. As we destroy ecosystems, forests, and the natural ecosystems, there are chances of wild pathogens getting released into the environment and jumping into the human beings and other animals that could cause deadly epidemics and pandemics. In fact, this is one hazard which has apocalyptic potential. It is possible for the rise of a dangerous enough virus or bacteria or fungus which can wipe out life on Earth. Just like a meteorite strike or a massive earthquake or a volcano, pandemics have apocalyptic potential. Is that clear? So let's understand more about this hazard. An epidemic is essentially the rapid spread of an infectious disease in a given population in a short period of time in a given region. If a deadly infectious disease caused by some dangerous pathogen, if it spreads very quickly in a given population in a given region within a short span of time, this is declared as an epidemic. An epidemic becomes a pandemic when the disease spreads over multiple countries, when the pathogen crosses international borders and enters multiple countries, and if a wave of infections begin in multiple countries, then it is declared as a pandemic. Is that clear? That's the only difference. Epidemic, pandemic, both are exactly the same. Both are infectious diseases. Epidemic is when it is limited to one or two countries or in a given region, in a given population. But if it spreads uncontrollably across multiple countries, across 4 or 5 countries or 10 countries or more than that, then it becomes a pandemic. So the concerned institution to declare epidemics and pandemics is the WHO, the World Health Organization. Understood? Respective governments can also declare epidemics depending on the situation. Concerned governments where the disease is affecting, those governments also can declare an epidemic, but to declare a pandemic, only WHO can do that. Now, India can declare the start of an epidemic. Brazil can declare the start of an epidemic. But India can't declare a pandemic has started. That is the task of WHO. All right? So when it comes to this disaster, countries work very closely with the World Health Organization. So WHO is the nodal global agency to deal with epidemics and pandemics. But at the national level, concerned governments have the power to declare their epidemics. But when it comes to pandemic, the declaration is made only by the WHO. Now, what causes an epidemic or a pandemic, and what are the determining factors that determines the impact, the scale of this disaster? The causes can be a deadly virus, especially a novel virus or a highly infectious bacteria, highly infectious and toxic fungus and algae. So, any such infectious pathogen, microorganism, can cause an epidemic or a pandemic. So, these pathogens could be of natural origin, they could be found naturally in the environment, or it could also be man made. Please understand this. Through genetic engineering, through biotechnology, it is possible to create super pathogens. Is that clear? It is possible to create super pathogens which are highly infectious. So, this can be done in a lab, in a highly secure biosafety lab, through inserting desired genes, by manipulating certain genes in the structure of these pathogens. You can create super pathogens. You can make them more infectious. You can make them more transmissible, right? You can make them to target particular organs and functions to make them more deadly. So, this can be done in a lab. Now, you might ask, why is this done? Who in their right mind would create super pathogens? This is done for two reasons. One, for research and development. This is how vaccines, drugs, medical cures are brought out. This is how experts study different diseases and deadly pathogens. So it is essential to produce these kind of genetically engineered and altered pathogens. It's for the good. Is that clear? Biosafety labs, sometimes run by governments or by private tech firms, biotech firms, they have to undertake this research. They have to work with dangerous pathogens, even make them undergo mutation, introduce genetic engineering as well, for the purposes of research and development. That is how we can better understand different pathogens, prepare accordingly for a epidemic or a pandemic, design drugs, vaccines, and cures. Is that clear? This is a good purpose. The other purpose for which these organisms are created in the lab is for bioweapons. Is that clear? For biological warfare or for bioterrorism. A terrorist group might be able to engineer a pathogen to cause a massive terror attack through a bio agent. Or one country might use biological agents against another as part of bio warfare to target the other side. So, bioweapons are possible. Many countries possess bioweapons, including India. But today we have a convention called Biological Weapons Convention, which has prohibited all forms of development, production, storage, and stockpiling and usage of bioweapons. It is prohibited under international law. Just like you have Chemical Weapons Convention, similarly, we have the Biological Weapons Convention. It prohibits any research into bioweapons, development of bioweapons, storage, production, usage, and stockpiling. Every activity associated with bioweapons is prohibited under the international convention. At one point, many countries possessed bioweapons. UK, US, India, Russia, China, right? Many countries had developed bioweapons such as weaponized anthrax, weaponized plague, and other weaponized viruses and bacteria, including the coronavirus family. But because of the Biological Weapons Convention, most of the countries have followed and abided by it, and they have all destroyed their bioweapon stockpile. India is a very important signatory. We are very strongly committed to the obligations of Chemical and Biological Weapons Convention. So we have voluntarily destroyed all chemical biological weapons, and we have proven this to the concerned organizations as well. Most responsible countries have done it. Even US and many big powers, right? China, Russia, they've all credibly shown to the world that they have destroyed all biochemical weapon stockpiles. But however, there is always a risk of covert facilities still possessing and developing and stockpiling bioagents, right? Through covert methods, some countries might still be retaining bioagents. That concern is always there. But at least as per the available information, most of the countries have followed the international convention and have destroyed the stockpile, and they're no longer producing bioweapons. But the possibility is always there that there could be certain covert facilities which many governments could be using to produce and stockpile bioweapons. Is that clear? US might have done it, China might have done it, India itself might have done it. But we are not aware of this in the public domain. Understood? These are the different causes of epidemics and pandemics: natural and possible man made causes. Now, the man made pathogens, they might accidentally leak. There could be an accidental leakage in a lab, or there could be a deliberate sabotage in order to release a pathogen. These are the man-made factors that can cause epidemics and pandemics. In these high secure biosafety labs, accidentally, despite all the safety measures, accidentally a dangerous pathogen might leak and it might spread in the community, triggering epidemics and pandemics. Or someone deliberately might leak it. Terrorists might do it, right? Vested interests or governments might do it as part of bio warfare. So these are man-made causes. But usually the epidemics, pandemics we have seen, they are largely natural in origin, including COVID-19. I know many of you got excited when I was talking about this. Many people still believe in conspiracy theories that China released COVID-19. It was from Wuhan Institute of Virology that COVID-19 leaked out. Please don't listen to these conspiracy theories, because all available evidence suggests that COVID-19 was of natural origin. Is that clear? Don't go by imaginary stories and fiction. Initially, yes, the possibility had to be considered. When the origins was not clearly known, the possibility of COVID-19 being man-made, either getting leaked accidentally in the lab or deliberately being leaked, should be considered. That's what every intelligence agency did, right? The CIA and every intelligence agency, including India's RAW, they considered the possibility of COVID-19 being of man-made origin. But CIA, which has extensively gone into the origin of COVID-19, has come out with enough evidence to show that most likely COVID-19 was of natural origin, not man-made origin. Is that clear? We haven't seen any evidence contradictory to that. WHO came to the same conclusion. Several researchers around the world who have conducted independent studies, they've all come to the same conclusion that most likely COVID-19 is of natural origin. It's highly unlikely that it is of man-made origin. All right? So please put all those conspiracy theories to rest. Don't ever mention that China caused COVID-19. China released COVID-19. It was a bio war. Don't ever mention this. That is conspiracy theory. You will lose your credibility. Is that clear? Now, coming to the determining factors regarding the impact of an epidemic. What determines the deadliness of a pathogen? There are many factors present, and I'm sure some of you are already aware of this because there has been a flood of material in the last 3 years regarding epidemics and pandemics. Right? Before 2019, none of you had heard about terms like social distancing or the importance of sanitization, right? Or terms like virulence, reservoir, vectors, or even terms like reproduction rate or R naught. All these terms have become common usage today because of COVID-19. I'm sure all of you are aware of this because you have read this repeatedly in newspapers, you have read about it online. So let us go through this once in a structured manner. Let's understand what factors determine the eventual impact of a dangerous pathogen that enters into human beings. When a pathogen jumps into humans, what do we call such a disease? Is anyone aware as to the name that we have associated to the jump of a pathogen from the wild into humans? What do we call that? Padmavati has given the right answer. Very good. Even Nani, Pravalika, Shweta, and Vaishna, and few others. We call it a zoonotic disease. Zoonotic disease is nothing but a disease which has jumped from the wild into human beings. It could be from natural ecosystems, from the forests, water bodies, etc., or from other animals, especially wild animals or birds. So, when a pathogen, maybe a virus, maybe a bacteria, or any pathogen, when it jumps from natural, the plant and animal world into the human world, we call that the zoonotic jump. All right. So, such diseases are called zoonotic diseases. So, there are many such zoonotic diseases which have caused epidemics and even pandemics. We have the Zika virus disease, or ZVD. Zika did cause a lot of concern. It still is a concern in some parts of the world. Do you guys know where Zika broke out and spread? In which part of the world? Zika virus or Zika virus disease became a major concern and epidemic. In which part of the world? Africa. The correct answer is South America, Brazil in particular. Of course, it has come up in other parts of the world, including in India, but the major outbreak where it became an epidemic is in Brazil. All right. I think you guys got confused with Ebola. Ebola is primarily in Africa, which is another major outbreak which has happened recently. In the last few years itself, we have seen some deadly epidemics like Zika in Brazil, Ebola in Africa, and there are plenty more. We have H1N1, which is a type of avian influenza flu, which has affected many countries, continues to affect India even today. Right? Under the avian influenza family, there are plenty of strains of viruses which can be quite deadly. Right? They mainly jump from birds to humans with the possibility of a vector being present in between, and they can cause serious diseases. Then, of course, we have the coronavirus family. Coronavirus is not new. We knew coronavirus for a very long time. It's an entire family of viruses. Coronavirus such as SARS, MERS, they had already caused deadly epidemics before. SARS had spread quite aggressively in Southeast Asia and China, across Asian countries back in early 2000. MERS had spread in Middle Eastern countries in the West Asia region. But then came the mother of at least the current generations, SARS coronavirus 2, SARS-CoV-2, or as we call it, COVID-19. Right? And there are many more in the past. We had the Spanish flu, the Bombay flu, we had a plague, right? HIV. There were plenty of other such epidemics and pandemics before. Plague, especially, was a very feared disease in the medieval period. Even in modern history, plague was deadly, and people they used to get scared if they heard the word plague. If they saw anyone with symptoms related to plague, or if few deaths happened with symptoms likely to replicate a plague, people would be so worried across that entire region. Just talk to your grandparents, they can tell you horror stories about plague, right? So in the medieval times, in modern times, entire civilizations have been wiped out through plague. In Europe, in Egypt, in several parts of the world, including Asia and India, plague has been a deadly disease. Then, of course, we had Spanish influenza and the Bombay flu a century ago, which was the last major deadly epidemic and pandemic we had seen. After that, the rest of them were pretty minor, right? Like SARS and MERS and even HIV, we could tackle and contain the spread. But what really took us by surprise was the uniqueness of SARS coronavirus 2, the uniqueness of COVID 19, the features of it, the factors associated with it, and the way in which it spread, the manner in which it spread so quickly. So, what determines the impact of such disasters is first herd level immunity amongst human beings and also immunity at an individual level. If our bodies are immune to these pathogens, if our immune system is able to recognize them and fight them back, obviously the disease will not cause a problem, right? The body will fight back these external bodies and it will be thrown out. The problem is when our body is not used to it, especially in case of novel pathogens. What do you mean by novel? Novel means new, something which is new, something which we had never experienced. Now, COVID-19 was a novel virus. It was for the first time, it was jumping to human beings, and thus none of the humans had been exposed to it. Our immune system had no memory of this virus. That's why it could not generate the immune response. So the virus could easily replicate in our bodies, spread the infection, and affect multiple organs, eventually causing death. Is that clear? So immunity plays a critical role in our defense against these diseases. Herd level immunity at the community level. What immunity does the whole community have? We as human beings, as a society, what extent of immunity have we developed? And second, at individual level, each person's immunity differs, right? On your genetics, your lifestyle, etc. All these factors play a role in determining your immunity level. This plays a very important role in determining the spread of the disease. All right. Next, virulence. How quickly can the pathogen spread? How quickly can it replicate? How quickly can it transmit from person to person? These factors play a critical role. Its rate of replication and transmission and mode of transmission as well. Mode of transmission is critical. Now see, deadly diseases like HIV didn't become the same kind of threat because HIV spreads through a particular route. HIV does not spread so easily, right? That's where we got lucky. Humans got fortunate. For HIV virus to spread from person to person, there are certain specific conditions. There should be some kind of fluid contact. There should be unsafe sexual intercourse with an infected person, or unsafe blood transfusion, or drug addicts who are using the same syringes, right? And if one of them is a HIV positive person, that is when the virus will make a jump. So HIV's spread was limited thanks to its difficult mode of transmission. Now, just because you touch a HIV person or eat food with them, you will not get the virus, right? That's why HIV did not become such a huge menace. It is a threat, but it didn't become the same menace like COVID-19. COVID-19 and other respiratory diseases are more deadlier because of their mode of transmission, which is air-to-air transmission. They can transmit through the air, through surface, and through contact. Those are the deadliest form of pathogens because humans are social beings. We come in contact with others. We will touch some surfaces which others will also touch, right? When you talk, when you sneeze, and when you perform even any basic activity like eating, drinking, etc., you will release certain droplets which will contain the pathogen. And when others come in touch or contact with it, they will contract the disease as well. So this factor plays a very, very important role. Its rate of replication, transmission, and mode of transmission, and as well as the incubation period. How long does it take to incubate and show symptoms and spread? COVID 19, for example, would quickly incubate in 3 to 4 days, and fourth day onwards, you will start showing symptoms, which means you can transmit this to others right now. So that short window also plays a role. Is that clear? So virulence is a very, very important factor. Next, the vector and the host. Vector is a animal or an organism that is a carrier of the pathogen. Like for example, in the case of mosquito-borne diseases, malaria, dengue, chikungunya, and the others, mosquito is only a vector. The mosquito itself is not affected. It's only a carrier which is carrying the pathogen and passing it on to human beings. Right? There are cases where birds, then pig, and bats also act as vectors. They only carry and pass it on to others. They themselves are not affected. Then you also have reservoir hosts, which are those animals and birds which are a reservoir of different pathogens. This is the origin. You have civet cats, pigs, bats, and various birds that are the reservoirs of many deadly pathogens. Is that clear? Wild animals in general, right? They do act as a reservoir host for several dangerous pathogens which we humans have not come in contact with. There are other animals and organisms acting as vectors, carriers, who simply transmit the virus to humans. So all the factors play a critical role, and of course the mobility, the speed and the volume of spread, which we determine through R naught or the reproduction rate. The rate at which the disease is spreading through the community, determined through R naught. If R naught is less than 1, then it is manageable. It means one infected person is passing on the disease to less than one person. If R naught is equal to 1, it means one infected person is infecting one more person on an average. Even then you can manage. You can still contain the spread. But the moment R naught crosses 1, if it becomes 1.5, 1.9, 2, 3, 4, it means each infected person is affecting multiple people. This is where you witness the wave of infections. It's an exponential curve that you will be looking at. The moment R naught jumps above 1, touches 2 and goes beyond 2, you will witness an exponential spike in the cases. Right? That's what we saw during COVID-19. There were multiple waves of infections. The first wave, second wave, third. Some countries went through fourth wave as well. Is that clear? So the infections will hit a certain peak before coming down and again picking up. Is that clear? Socio-cultural factors also play a role in its spread. The practices that we have in our society and culture, like in some cultures, shaking hand is a common practice. In some cultures, giving a hug and a peck on the cheek is a common culture, right? It's a social practice. So in such societies, diseases will spread quickly, right? This is where the Indian tradition of greeting a person with namaste, with just folding hands without touch, without contact, became more popular, right? And other practices linked with religion and tradition, even that plays a role. Religious gatherings, religious events, religious beliefs. In several orthodox religious beliefs, science is put down, scientific evidence is dismissed, and blind faith and belief is promoted in a so-called God. This actually undermines our efforts to curb the spread of a disease. See, it's not about one religion. You find this in every religion. Be it any religion, The orthodoxy and superstition associated with religion and the blind faith and belief that many people have could become a dangerous factor that could aggravate the spread of the epidemic and the pandemic. We saw this happening during COVID 19, right? In several countries across religions, be it Christianity, Hinduism, Islam, be it Judaism, across religion, the superstitious beliefs and practices further the spread of the virus, right? Because there will be large gatherings during religious events, or there would be a certain cultural religious hesitance against taking vaccines, against believing in science. So this becomes a major factor as well that administrators have to keep in mind when tackling a epidemic or a pandemic. We have to overcome these challenges. We can't entertain them. We have to overcome them through scientific evidence and to right governmental policies. Next, drug resistance also plays a role. Since we have abused, overused drugs, antibiotics, self-medicated ourselves, our bodies and even pathogens would have developed a certain degree of resistance against the first line and second line of drugs that we have. Like take antibiotics, for example, right? In countries like India, where we pop pills on our own as if it's candy, right? We don't even consult doctors. We don't take prescriptions. Pharmacists don't ask for prescriptions, right? You go ask for any powerful antibiotic, they'll sell it to you, right? The moment we get any symptom, people, they go purchase the drugs they want from the local chemist and they consume it. And they don't even complete the course. That is the worst part. So when you abuse antibiotics and drugs and essential medicines, drug resistance will build up. The pathogen becomes smarter. It mutates, it evolves to overcome the impact of the drug. Your body's immunity gets compromised. Drug resistance would get built up. And hence, your first and second line of defense gets wiped out. We do stare at a possibility where the first and second line of antibiotics that we have, which transformed human healthcare, could become ineffective in the coming years because of overuse and abuse that has given rise to super bacteria and super pathogens. Right? So all these factors play a critical role along with climate change and environment destruction. I've seen that many students get surprised when I say that climate change can cause pandemics. They get confused. They're like, how can climate change, global warming contribute to pandemics? How can environment destruction contribute to pandemics? See, please understand, these pathogens are not coming from an unknown place. They're coming from our own nature, right? In our nature, in the earth, there are plenty of places where many pathogens are still hidden, which we humans have never exposed to. Take, for example, zombie viruses, which remain frozen in the polar ice caps and glaciers. There are several zombie pathogens which have been frozen for millions and millions of years. They are locked up in ice, in permafrost, in polar ice caps and glaciers. Now, if we are accelerating global warming and increasing the melting of ice, these zombie viruses get released, they could get activated again, and they could make the jump to other organisms and eventually affect humans. Now, since we have never experienced these millions of years old viruses and pathogens, we will have no immunity against it, and they could have hold apocalyptic potential to wipe out the entire human race. Is that clear? Then the more you destroy forests, the more you consume wild animals, the more you hunt, poach, destroy ecosystems, chances are higher that these viruses or other pathogens could make the jump. Is that clear? For example, in wild bush markets where bush meat, wild meat is consumed, right? In many cultures, it's a tradition, it's a culinary practice to consume wild meat. They consume bat meat, the meat of many wild animals as well. It's a delicacy and it's seen as a cultural trait as well. See, we're not building any stereotypes here. We're not commenting on any race or ethnicity or culture. But what I mean to say is that these practices, which we have continued, right, we have turned towards over exploitation. Traditionally, tribal communities and indigenous ethnic groups, they have always consumed wild meat, right? It has been a manageable problem because Tribal communities are very sustainable, right? They protected the nature and forests. They were respectful towards all life forms. There was never over exploitation before. But now the kind of commercialization which has happened and the way in which we are over exploiting our resources, right, has introduced wild bush meat into bigger commercial markets where there is large scale exploitation happening. For example, in Africa, in China, in Vietnam, in Indonesia, in the northeast of India, there are many wild bush meat markets where hunters and poachers, they hunt wild meat, sell it in the open markets. Now whoever is working with these organisms, the butcher, the hunter, the one who's consuming it, the one who's selling it, they could all come in contact with contaminated blood or feces or excreta, and they could contract these deadly pathogens which are in the wild, which have never entered human beings. Right? That's what most likely happened in the case of COVID 19. That's what happened with SARS. It was determined that SARS made a jump from a civet cat to a farmer who was working closely with civet cats. There are cases of avian influenza affecting farm workers who work in who work with chickens and birds in the animal husbandry industry. Right? Similarly, COVID 19 is most likely attributed to the wild bushmeat market in Wuhan. Right? That is where the most likely origin is. So all these factors play a very, very important role. The more you destroy the environment, the more you accelerate climate change. We could release deadly pathogens. And once they make the jump, right, once they affect humans, they could spread wildly, causing these deadly diseases. Is that clear? Now, with this, I would like to take a short break. It's almost 6:50 right now. Let's come back by 7:05. Take a 15 minutes break. We'll come back and resume the discussion. We'll finish the topic on epidemics. Then we'll talk about forest fires, and we'll be discussing man-made disasters, including industrial disasters and CBRN disasters. So that's the agenda for today. I hope to complete this entirely. So tomorrow we can take up the last module. All right. So see you back at 7:05 p.m. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the session. We were talking about epidemics before the break. We understood what's an epidemic, how does it spread, what factors determine the spread of these epidemics and pandemics. We even understood the causes, the natural and man made causes that could contribute to epidemics and pandemics. Now, as part of the disaster management, let's understand how we can contain the spread of these infectious diseases. What measures, what steps need to be taken? So, as part of pre disaster planning and preparedness, we can take up a number of preventive and mitigative steps. As always, we should have a early warning system in place for alerts. If the early warning comes at the right time and if the right isolation quarantine measures are put in place, we can contain the spread of these infectious diseases. But this has to be done in the initial days itself. Every hour, every day matters when it comes to the spread of such dangerous diseases. Now, take COVID 19 for example. Initial reports suggest that the breakout in China was reported as early as November 2019. Until January, China kept the world under complete ignorance as it wouldn't share the information regarding the emergence of a new novel virus. It was only in December that some reports came out that a deadly disease is appearing to be spreading in Wuhan. But China dismissed the reports, did not share any information, any data with WHO and other countries. So, this lack of transparency from China allowed the virus to easily spread to other countries as well before the world could realize the threat. By January and February, we were already seeing cases spreading and waves coming up in Italy, in Iran, in South Korea, in Japan, and then across Europe and US. It was only in March 2020, that the WHO declared COVID 19 as a pandemic. So we had wasted precious 3 to 4 months before taking proper global action. Right? All actions were limited to few countries. They were only reacting, responding to the incidents. By then, the virus had already spread far and wide in the community. So the response time is critical, and hence early warning systems and sharing of information transparently is very, very important. This is where the role of WHO also has been criticized. WHO faced a lot of criticism in its ineffectiveness in handling the pandemic and especially in holding China accountable for the mistakes it had committed. See, China is not directly responsible for the breakout of the disease. That could happen anywhere. Zika virus disease on Brazil. Can you blame Ebola on African countries? Tomorrow, if a disease breaks out in India, can India be blamed for it? Not entirely, right? There could be a natural jump of these pathogens. It's again beyond human control. No country alone can be singled out and blamed for it. So, similarly, we can't blame China for the emergence of COVID 19. It was not even under China's control. But what China did after the breakout is what matters. This is where China has been heavily criticized by the global community. It kept the world blind for 2 months, did not share the information, misled the WHO, and only when things went out of control, only then China gave some partial information. WHO failed to hold China accountable, and WHO did not have its own measures to take further action. Again, the problem is with the structure and powers of WHO. Again, it's unfair to put all the blame on WHO as well, because WHO is just a scientific organization. It does not have any enforcement powers of its own. If a country is not sharing information, giving access to WHO scientists, WHO can't do anything about it. It does not have any penalizing powers or enforcement powers. So the structure of WHO, the powers given to it, has come under question. So the need of the hour is for a global framework through the United Nations and WHO, where we can put in place a transparent and accountable reporting system to detect future epidemics and pandemics at the earliest, so immediate action can be taken to curb the spread. Unfortunately, we haven't done it even now. This is the problem with us humans. This is the problem with geopolitics. Every country is concerned only about its self-interest. Even today, after all the devastating impact of COVID-19, no country is serious about creating a global framework. Ideally, there should have been a response mechanism built in where through the UN and WHO, we could have a transparent, accountable mechanism for reporting such incidents. Even today, we don't have that in place. Hopefully, in the coming years, we should draw lessons from COVID-19, the mistakes that were made by all the countries and WHO, and we should try to avoid repeating these mistakes. Next, promoting sanitation and hygiene as part of our day-to-day culture. It took a pandemic to train all the humans that we should be concerned about sanitation and hygiene. Basic practices like washing your hands, wearing a mask, maintaining social distance, isolating, quarantining yourself if you're suffering from any symptoms, right? In most countries, these practices were unheard of. Many in India, I'm sure you also know about this, many were taken aback, they were surprised, they were shocked in January and February 2020 when they heard that countries could be locked down. No one had heard the word lockdown till then. There were countries which had experienced this before, like China and Southeast Asian countries. If you've ever been to, let's say, Thailand or Singapore or Vietnam or even China, it's a practice there where people in general wear masks. In general, they pay more attention to sanitation hygiene because they have experienced epidemics before. They have gone through such waves before. In other parts of the world where it was unheard of, it came as a shock. Enforcing that becomes problematic for the governments, right? You can't enforce this through rules. So this requires behavioral change to be introduced. You have to change behaviors, you have to change attitudes. This can come only with awareness, training, and promotion of the culture of sanitation and hygiene. Even when COVID-19 was breaking apart India, there were many patients who were unwilling to get tested, unwilling to quarantine themselves, breaking the basic rules. I'm sure you would have experienced this in your own families and in your immediate circles, right? Such irresponsible behavior is a result of lack of training, lack of preparedness. In general, if there is a culture of cleanliness, sanitation, hygiene, if people understand the role of social distancing, if that behavioral attitudinal change is brought out, then it acts as a natural vaccine. We call it a social vaccine. When a vaccine is still not ready, through such measures, we can at least implement a social vaccine. That's where social distancing plays a role. All right? Lockdowns can be effective if used strategically by cutting down economic activities, by restricting people to their homes, apart from the first line responders. You can restrict human interaction and thus curb the spread of the pathogen. But problem is, initially countries went into a panic mode. Every country, including India, imposed sudden and harsh lockdowns without much thought behind it. This will have a huge economic and social impact. Look at the impact on migrant workers, the economic loss, the reverse migration which happened from cities back to rural areas. the price that poor people paid again, right? For rich and upper class, middle class, it was easy. You simply switched to working from home, online education, right? You had entertainment at home, YouTube, Netflix, whatnot. This is a luxury poor people don't have. Daily wage earners, right? The poor people lost their jobs. They have to work every single day to earn their livelihood. So when lockdowns were imposed without any thought, without a basic rationale, it hit millions and millions of people, not just in India, around the world, right? Governments went into a panic mode. They thought lockdowns would be effective when they enforce it immediately. But there should be a better rational thought and a strategic implementation of lockdowns. This is a lesson that countries learned in the first lockdown. That's why in the next waves, you saw strategic lockdowns being imposed. Is that clear? Instead of imposing lockdowns blanketly and blindly, strategic lockdowns were imposed later, in the later half of 2020, 2021, even in 2022. Strategic lockdowns were imposed because that gives better results with minimal economic and social impact. It's about balancing the two. Yes, it's important to fight the disease, doesn't mean you rupture your economy and make millions of people suffer. While the rich and middle class have no impact, poor people will continue to suffer the impact. Right? Such policies cannot be adopted. At least going forward, governments have to be more aware of the rationality behind lockdowns. Lockdowns serve a very important purpose. It gives enough time for the government, for the healthcare system to prepare. Because once the virus or pathogen is spreading wildly, once it's out of control, it will result in a massive wave where hospitals will be flooded and crowded, beds and ICUs will not be available, doctors will be in shortage, right? People will die on the streets in their homes without medical care. To prevent that crisis from happening, you have to impose a strategic lockdown for a few weeks so the healthcare system can prepare. Enough beds can be allocated, medicines can be procured, oxygen can be procured, ICU beds can be set up. So, lockdown is a time for the government, the health workers, police, and every first responder to prepare for what is coming next. It is inevitable. The wave will happen. The moment you lift the lockdown, virus will spread, bringing the next wave. So, lockdown is a strategic tool to prepare for what is to come. When it is imposed blindly without a proper strategy, it has a huge negative impact as well. But countries learned this and then they started going for strategic lockdowns. But COVID 19 really taught us how important public health infrastructure is for a country. In a country like India, where healthcare is largely privatized, right? We all receive healthcare mainly through private clinics, hospitals, etc. Right? Be it at primary healthcare level or secondary healthcare or tertiary healthcare. We all largely rely on private hospitals. Our expenditure on healthcare is very high because of the privatization of healthcare in India. Governments have invested very less in public healthcare. Government hospitals are not provided the funds, the infrastructure, they lack quality. People have no trust or faith in government healthcare facilities. So, strengthening your public healthcare infrastructure is critical, along with improving your epidemic surveillance, improving your testing facilities, improving diagnostics, genome sequencing to study different pathogens, understand their mutations and the new strains which are coming up. For that, the infrastructure should be present, right? Next, the importance of implementing quarantine protocols and facilities, screening passengers at airports. Because in case of an epidemic pandemic, usually the pathogen comes from other countries. So you have to seal your ports of entry. Seaports and airports and land ports have to be sealed. And you have to check every person who's entering the country. Put them through a basic health checkup. Look out for symptoms. Quarantine them. If they display symptoms, test and ensure that you conduct contact tracing. Contact tracing is critical as part of the protocol. You identify the number of people the person has come in contact with, put all of them in quarantine and isolation, and see if they display symptoms. So these steps are very critical in the initial days. This is still a time to curb the spread. But if you fail in these protocols, then again it's out of control. There's nothing you can do about it. It will spread in the community, causing widespread devastation. So in India, the second wave, particularly the Delta variant, and even the initial wave as well, were very deadly, causing mass destruction, killing lakhs of people, right? Many deaths go unaccounted, right? Not all the deaths are accounted, not all the cases are reported. Many people hesitated to get diagnosed because the moment such diseases spread, there is a stigma, there is a taboo around it. Now, let's say somehow you caught the infection, you will be boycotted by your family or your society, right? There are many cases where people were mistreated just because they contracted the infection. So, that is the depraved manner in which the society behaves. This is where you need better training, better awareness. Yes, quarantine isolation is needed, but you need not target them. You need not humiliate them, boycott them. When you do that, a stigma and taboo develops and people get scared to get tested, right? Even if they have symptoms, they don't go out and tell this to others or they don't get tested because of the fear of being targeted. So these are social measures, behavioral changes are needed. You have to strengthen your public healthcare infrastructure so we have enough surveillance, testing, diagnostic facilities available, enough hospital beds available, doctors available to tackle these infectious spreads. You have to invest in research and development to study different pathogens and also to develop vaccines and drugs. Vaccines can give you immunity, drugs can help in treatment, right? So, research and development is necessary in medical sciences, biosciences, and also in pharmaceuticals and vaccine research and development. In the long run, focus on environment conservation, right? Tackle hunting and poaching, prohibit wild meat consumption. Today, you don't have to depend on wild meat, right? Today, you live in a very different world. Prohibit wild meat markets, enforce the restrictions, prohibitions on hunting and poaching, conserve and protect ecosystems, respect nature. This is very, very essential. Learn from tribal communities, right? Respect the nature, ensure you don't overexploit. Health insurance is critical again to transfer the risk. In India, majority of the people didn't have insurance even today. As the pandemic declined, people have again become complacent, right? Many of them don't have health insurance. So such measures are necessary where the government encourages people to change their behavior, their attitude. It requires a restructuring of the healthcare system, both public and private sector, right? Investments in research and development, awareness within the government regarding how to tackle such situations. So we need to draw these key lessons from COVID-19 and ensure we don't lose out these lessons. We have to implement them, learn from the mistakes that were committed. So there should be a very effective response. Communication has to be very clear. In this regard, India was much better. The Indian government, starting right from Prime Minister Modi to the Health Ministry and all the political leaders in the country, and even state governments, they were very, very responsible when it came to reporting and communication, right? The clear messages were given, warnings were sounded, right? Without that message, people will take this very lightly. Now, see how other world leaders reacted. Look at conservative countries, how they reacted. In US, we had Donald Trump, who has very less faith in science. In Brazil, you had Jair Bolsonaro, all right-wing leaders with very little faith in science. They dismissed the threat from the pandemic. They ridiculed it. They said it's not a major threat. And because of that wrong communication, their followers and people in general don't take the threat seriously. Many called it even a conspiracy theory, right? And as a result, look at the impact in Brazil, look at the impact in US. Developed countries like US took a devastating hit, much more than India. And large part of the blame lies with leaders like Donald Trump. Same with Brazil, took a massive hit. Of course, India also took a hit, but at least there was slightly better management on India's part due to the right communication from the government, from the administration officials, from political leaders. The right message was sent out, spreading the warnings, the risk associated with the disease. We scaled up our testing, tracing, isolation mechanisms, especially at the local level, the local bodies, the state health departments, Ministry of Health and Family Welfare. They all implemented the required protocols, tried implementing contact tracing. Kerala, especially, has a well established track record in contact tracing because Kerala has seen many spread of infectious diseases. It has a very efficient contact tracing and quarantine protocol in place, right? So, this is a key measure along with social distancing, lockdowns, engaging the community, and of course, treating the patients and protecting the workforce, the healthcare workers and police. Since the first responders are exposing themselves, you need to protect them, respect what they are doing, and ensure they are protected. Give them PPE kits, provide them all the facilities needed because they are in the line of fire, and ensure that patients get the right treatment. So, all these are lessons that we should draw from the latest epidemic and pandemic we dealt with, right? And we have to implement this for future cases as well. So, having this basic knowledge is very essential. Understanding the scientific aspect of it, the disaster management part of it, and also the economic social part of it is very, very important. You have to keep all these considerations into mind when you're planning for disaster management. Clear? So, this completes my discussion on epidemics and pandemics. Now, let's move on to the next hazard, that is forest fires. Very small topic. We'll cover this quickly and I'll also give you some points about lightning. Forest fires are also known as wildfires. These are massive fires that spread wildly in the forests. They consume vast areas of forests, they destroy biodiversity. They not only destroy the forests, they also destroy animals, birds, and the entire flora fauna will suffer extensive damage in such cases of forest fires. These forest fires are triggered by natural factors and as well as by man-made factors. Now, can you guys tell me any region which is frequently affected by forest fires in India or anywhere in the world? Do you know any examples, any place in India or around the world which has been very badly affected by forest fires? USA, California, Greece, Brazil, Amazon, Australia. Very good. There are some places which are more vulnerable, like California, for example, then Southern Europe, particularly Italy, Greece, Spain, then Brazil, then even Indonesia and Malaysia, Australia, because Australia recently witnessed a devastating forest fire. In the Australian outback, there was a massive fire a few years back that destroyed Australia's biodiversity. California is a regular victim. Every year, California suffers from massive forest fires. South Europe is facing an increased risk in the last few years. Brazil, particularly in the Amazon. Then Indonesia and Malaysia in the Borneo equatorial forests. Australia, and as well as India. All these countries suffer from the impact of forest fires. All right. The natural causes that contribute to forest fires includes lightning during thunderstorms and heavy rains. Lightning, which is triggered, releases tremendous electricity and energy, and when they strike forests or trees or grass, which is dry enough, it can easily ignite them, thus setting fire, which can spread very quickly, that can consume the entire forest. Then heat waves, which we discussed previously, right? Extreme temperatures during summer, extreme heat during summer can trigger a fire in the dry biomass. In the summer season, there will be a lot of dry biomass available. Leaves would have dried up, grass would have dried out. They can easily catch fire under these extreme heat conditions if temperatures are constantly above 40 degrees, right? And if there is that heat wave, definitely the dry biomass can catch fire, which can spread and consume the entire forest. Volcanoes, which release hot lava and magma, right? They will literally burn down forests. They'll burn down the entire vegetation in their path. Even invasive alien species can contribute in the long term to forest fires. When non-native species have entered an ecosystem, right, they weaken the ecosystem. They weaken the natural defenses of the ecosystem. See, in any ecosystem, there is a natural strength associated with biodiversity of the ecosystem. The interaction between plants and animals and the entire food chain would be such that every ecosystem will be inherently strong enough. It will have an equilibrium of its own. And sometimes forest fires are good, right? Limited natural forest fires are good because it removes all the unnecessary dead material and protects the soil fertility as well. And sometimes natural forest fires are seen as good for the whole ecosystem. It helps in regeneration and rejuvenation. So every ecosystem has its own inherent strength because of its natural defenses and biodiversity. But when alien species enter and spread in an ecosystem, these are non-native species. It could be a plant or a fish or an animal or a bird or even a pathogen. When such alien species enter a ecosystem and they spread invasively, they destroy the ecosystem, the biodiversity and the food chain, and they create an imbalance in the delicate balance, the equilibrium that is present. This weakens the natural immunity of the ecosystem, makes it more prone to forest fires. I can give you an example. Let's say there is a dense forested area. This region does not have any weed or any waste grass. So the forest ecosystem is naturally immune to the trigger of a fire. Fire can't easily catch in such a dense, thick jungle because it doesn't have enough grass or enough weed species which can easily catch fire. Now, what if there is an invasive weed which has entered the ecosystem? The weed will take over very quickly. It affects the other plants, it affects the availability of food and nutrients, compromises soil productivity, affects the food chain and all the animals and the species. So after a few years, you will see that the whole ecosystem would have changed, the structure would have changed. The thick forest would have given rise to small weeds and grass, and that could easily catch fire during the summer season. That's why invasive alien species is also a threat, along with long-term climate change and global warming. They weaken the ecosystems, the defenses will go down, changes the structure of the ecosystem, and makes it more vulnerable to the impact of fire. The man-made causes. There are plenty of man-made causes, right? We humans have a knack to destroy our environment in many different ways, starting with agriculture. Shifting cultivation is a major threat. You would have heard about jhum cultivation or slash and burn cultivation, where farmers deliberately set fire to the field to clear the path for agriculture, right? They carry out deforestation, set fire deliberately, and once they finish few cropping seasons, the soil loses fertility. So they set fire and they start farming in the next area, right? They keep shifting the cultivation field by burning down the forest and the previous residue, the crop residue. So jhum cultivation, slash and burn cultivation, it could easily go out of control and it could set fire to the nearby forests. Clearing of land for minor forest produce. to collect the forest produce or any other exploitative industrial activity. Industries, mining firms, they are known to set deliberate fires to clear forest land to make way for their industries. We saw this happening in Amazon recently in Brazil. Former Brazilian president Jair Bolsonaro was a far right wing leader. He gave off contracts to many industries and allowed them to burn down Amazon by setting deliberate fires. It was this fire which went out of control and consumed a large section of the Amazonian forest. So, government policies, industrial expansion, urbanization, and collection of forest produce by local communities, they're all a threat because deliberate fire is being set near forest areas or inside forest areas. Stubble burning is also a major concern. The practice of burning the crop residue, because farmers find it difficult to clear the residue which is left behind, the crop stubble which is left after the harvest. So they set fire to the entire field to clear the crop residue. Now, this fire could easily spread, and the nearby trees and forests could catch fire, and it could go on, it could further spread uncontrollably. So these are major risks. So, land grabbing, poaching, illegal trade of wildlife products, and even exploitative tourism, they're all major concerns which directly contribute to forest fires. For example, campfires put by tourists and hikers. Irresponsible tourists and hikers, they might put campfires, they may not switch off the campfire completely. Right? Putting campfire is not the problem. That will not cause a forest fire. But if the tourists leave without extinguishing the fire completely, that fire could spread and catch on to the entire forest. There are many cases where this has happened. Even a carelessly disposed cigarette has been known to cause forest fires. Is that clear? So such irresponsible behavior by tourists, hikers, and locals is also responsible for forest fires. Is that clear? Recently, there was an incident in California a couple of years ago. A family, they were hosting a party, a birthday party, and they forgot to extinguish the fire they had created for cooking food. They finished the party, they left, the fire kept burning, and it spread very quickly to the nearby forest area, and it consumed thousands and thousands of hectares of forests in California. That is a devastation that can happen because of these fires which have been lit carelessly and they have not been extinguished by irresponsible people. All right? So all of these are threats created by human beings. These are man-made threats. So forest fires can cause tremendous damage. There will be loss of lives, not just humans, even wildlife. Several animals, birds, and species would get killed. Livelihood of tribals and farmers will be disrupted. Biodiversity will suffer. And as the forest land is cleared due to the forest or due to the fire, the soil will become vulnerable for erosion. Before, the forest was holding the soil, giving it the support and the fertility that was necessary. If forests are burnt down entirely, it increases soil erosion because now the soil is exposed to the elements, to the wind and rain. Soil erosion increases, that causes land degradation, desertification, which further aggravates landslides and floods. We understood previously how deforestation contributes to more landslides and floods. So forest fire is a way of deforestation. It weakens the soil, weakens the slopes, contributing to landslide and floods. And it creates a vicious cycle that increases global warming. Because the burning of forests releases massive amounts of carbon and greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, contributing to more global warming. And increase in global warming will contribute to more heat waves and extreme weather, which further causes more forest fires. So it's a vicious cycle that gets created. And most likely, we're already in one such vicious cycle. Previously, Southern Europe would never witness this kind of forest fires that you're seeing right now. It's quite unprecedented, right? So, global warming drives forest fires, and forest fires further contribute to global warming. So, this is the devastating impact of this disaster, and hence, it's very important to implement a well thought out disaster management plan. First, you have to analyze the risk, create a hazard vulnerability map, and then start taking preventive mitigative measures. Forest fires can be prevented. Through the right measures, you can prevent forest fires, and you can definitely mitigate the impact. You can contain the spread as well. So, in the case of India, almost 21.4% of the country is under forest cover, and it's prone to forest fires. Out of the total forest cover we have, nearly 21.4% of that area is highly vulnerable to forest fires, particularly Northeast India, Central India. They are the most vulnerable. They report the most forest fires. All right. The Northeast region and Central India, they are the most vulnerable. Then even the Himalayan belt and Western and Eastern Ghats, they are also vulnerable. They also report a lot of forest fires. But Northeast India and Central India, they are the most vulnerable. So every year in India, there are thousands of forest fires which are detected. In fact, you're looking at a satellite map. It's a map generated through satellite data, which keeps track of forest fires. Because satellites are very effective in monitoring forest fires. They can keep a watch for the start and spread of forest fires, and they can give very reliable real-time data. So ISRO and many other space agencies, they have the ability to study and map out forest fires through satellite information. Right? Through thermal imaging, they can detect the breakout of these fires and put them on a map, which gives us a very better understanding of the risk, the hazard, and the vulnerability. So that's how we have figured out that these are the areas where we witness the massive and the most number of fires. So Central India, Northeast India have the highest risk, followed by the Himalayan belt and Western and Eastern Ghats. Is that clear? So there are many examples from India itself. In Meghalaya, in Mizoram, there have been deadly forest fires. In Uttarakhand as well. In Chhattisgarh, Odisha belt. In Karnataka, Tamil Nadu and Kerala, particularly in the Nilgiris ranges near Ooty, right? There are many forest fires that occur during the summer months. So in order to manage the disaster, along with risk assessment and the hazard vulnerability mapping, we have to create an early warning mechanism. Early warning systems become essential so that with real-time alerts, we can respond with effective firefighting methods. For this, you have to strengthen your firefighting capabilities. It's not easy to fight a forest fire. It's not like fire in a building or fire in a house or fire in a city, which can be more easily contained. These wildfires are impossible to contain. All right. But through some strategies, you can at least reduce the spread. For example, there is a traditional method of creating forest fire lines. It's a traditional practice followed by forest department, tribals, and locals. What they do is, before the summer season starts, deliberate fires are set to clear the dry biomass and also to divide and fragment the forest through these fire lines. This is a very effective method of limiting forest fires. I'll explain how it works. Forest departments at the state level, they work with tribal communities, locals, they give them some incentives. They also bring some volunteers from environmental organizations, NGOs, and together they take up the manual work. It's very hard work. For several weeks, they go through the forest picking up all the dry material which is available, the leaves, the grass, everything, right? They collect everything, pile it up in few places and set deliberate fire to it. Or they set controlled fires. They set fire to these dry materials and keep extinguishing it so that it doesn't spread. All right, it's a very cumbersome manual exercise, but if it is done before the summer, right before summer starts, it will prevent larger fires from taking root. All right, so deliberate setting of fires, controlled fires is important to clear the dry biomass. It's a controlled fire, deliberate fire before the summer season. You basically remove the fuel, you remove the dry material, the fuel is taken out. The other method is creating these fire lines, forest fire lines, which fragments the forest, divides the forest. Now, for example, assume that this is a forest, this rectangle is a forest area. Now, if fire starts in this corner, without any intervention, it will spread across the entire forest and it will burn the entire forest. Now, what the forest department does is that it will create these fire lines. They basically break the forest into different segments by burning a patch of land. They remove any plants, even trees, grass, everything is removed, set on fire, and they basically create a small barrier kind. The two parts of the forest get divided, so fire that breaks out here gets limited. It does not spread into the next part of the forest. All right, they create these pathways. It's like a small pathway or like a small road kind that they create. They remove the tree structures, the plants, the grass, everything. They set fire to it, remove that, and that is called a fire line. It's like a line which is drawn inside a forest. It will be few meters, maybe 5 to 10 meters. That is enough to hold the fire in one corner and not allow it to spread to the other pockets of the forest. Sometimes they dig trenches. Trenches are dug and filled with water as well, if possible. That's another technique of creating these fragments within the forest to limit the fire into one block and not allow it to spread to the other blocks. So such traditional methods have to be taken up every year during the summer season, right before the summer starts. Then spreading awareness amongst locals and tourists regarding responsible behavior. Extinguishing any open fire, right? This should be taught. People should be made aware of it. Tourists and locals should be aware of the consequences. Then land use planning to check urbanization and industrialization near forest areas. By regulating urban activities, industrial activities, and the expansion of these urban areas through land use planning, you can save and protect the forests. Then conserving the natural buffers, protecting the lakes, rivers, and wetlands inside the forest. It acts as a natural firefighting mechanism. The presence of water bodies inside a forest, if it's healthy enough, it cuts off the fire. And of course, we strengthen our own firefighting capabilities. You make use of helicopters, drones, come out with chemical-based fire extinguishers, which can quickly extinguish the fire. Use Bambi buckets to collect large quantities of water through helicopters and drones and spray it on the forest fire. You would have seen visuals of a helicopter carrying a huge bucket kind of structure, right? It drops the buckets into the nearby lakes or rivers or water bodies, collects the water and splashes this on the fire zones. So that bucket you see suspended from a helicopter is called a Bambi bucket. All right. So that's a basic tool which is used. Today, drones can play a critical role here, especially swarm drones that operate in a group. which are automated, they can be very effective in dispersing fire retardants. Right? Chemical based fire retardants can be sprayed, which is not harmful to the environment. Non toxic chemical based fire retardants can be developed. Right? Today, you get these fire bombs. You might have seen that. They are used for indoor applications in homes, industries, and factories and offices, where you keep that fire bomb. It looks like a spherical object. And the moment there is a fire, it automatically goes off. It detects the fire and it goes off, thus releasing and spraying the fire retardant, which very effectively extinguishes the fire. So such techniques can be scaled up to disperse fire retardants across large areas to contain the forest fire. But of course, the long-term solution is tackling climate change and global warming. Is that clear? So all these measures are part of disaster management with regard to forest fires. India is also a big victim. India does suffer from very regular forest fires. A lot of forest area is burnt down during the summer season. So through better planning, better preparedness, and better implementation of these measures, we can safeguard our forests and thus protect lives, livelihood, and the environment and biodiversity. Is that clear? So before I take up some questions, I would like to give you an important point about lightning. Remember, in the previous class, we did talk about lightning. I told you it is indeed a major disaster, according to experts. In India alone, 2,500 people are killed every single year. Every year, 2,500 people are killed in the country. In the last few decades, more than 1 lakh people have lost their lives due to lightning. It's one of the most underrated, underappreciated, and underacknowledged disasters in the country. Lightning happens in remote places usually. These are standalone incidents which happen here and there. So that's why we don't feel the true impact of lightning, right? Today, a lightning might happen in some village in Odisha. Tomorrow, a lightning might happen in Maharashtra. Or in the morning, there's a lightning in Karnataka. Then by evening, there are major lightnings in Rajasthan, right? So there will be multiple isolated incidents, standalone isolated incidents happening in remote places. So no one sees the full picture, the big picture. Because of these isolated lightning incidents, maybe one person has been killed, 2, 3 people have been killed, right? So people dismiss the threat. They think it's just one small remote incident which happened, isolated incident. Even the government has the same attitude. But if you look at the collective picture for the entire country for an entire year, 2,500 plus people are getting killed. And that's quite a big number. Data clearly shows that more than 1 lakh Indians have been killed in the last 30 to 40 years. So experts believe that lightning should be classified as a disaster. However, the government of India has not notified lightning as a disaster. Okay. Saturday, 7:30 a.m. Post independence. Yeah. So sorry, guys, for the interruption. I've just received an update. This Saturday, the coming Saturday, you'll have an extra class for post independence history by Rohit sir. I think you had a small portion remaining. So from 7:30 a.m. this Saturday, you'll have an extra class. Don't forget to attend this session. All right. So this Saturday, 7:30 a.m., you'll have an extra class for post-independence history by Rohit sir. Please note this down. Now, coming back to our discussion, experts believe that lightning should be classified as a disaster because of its impact. But Government of India has not notified lightning as a disaster according to the Disaster Management Act. State governments are demanding the notification. Several states which are badly affected, like West Bengal, Rajasthan, Odisha, Jharkhand, they report the highest deaths in India from lightning. Now, state governments are not able to compensate the victims. They are not able to provide compensation to the victims because it is not a notified disaster. If it's not a notified disaster, funds cannot be drawn from the state disaster response fund to compensate the victims. Remember, I told you we have a dedicated fund for disaster response. We have National Disaster Response Fund and State Disaster Response Fund. States cannot draw money from SDRF if it's not a notified disaster. This power is with the central government. The government of India has to officially notify a disaster under the DM Act. But Indian government has not done this. State governments which are suffering from the impact, they are urging the center to notify lightning as a disaster. In the last few months, West Bengal, Rajasthan, and few other governments have strongly demanded that lightning should be classified as a disaster so that they can draw funds from SDRF and compensate the victims at least. But the center says it's not needed. I'll explain the logic. The center has said, with regard to lightning, there is no need to notify. There is no need to notify lightning as a disaster, according to the central government. Because the center believes that lightning deaths are preventable very easily. According to the center, lightning deaths are preventable. We already have early warning and forecasting alerts available through the IMD. IMD keeps track of thunderstorms and lightning as well, and it would have given very specific alerts to certain regions, to certain districts, certain villages. They would have been put on alert. All right. So the central government believes that with better awareness, with better training, lightning deaths are completely preventable. That is why the center says there is no need to notify lightning as a disaster. Is that clear? Since specific alerts are available that in this district, in these villages, lightning risk is there. When the alert is given few hours before, few days before, people should be careful. They should not venture out. They should not unnecessarily risk themselves by exposing themselves in the outside during the lightning alert period. So center is saying that state governments and local authorities, they should use the alert to spread the awareness, carry out training, and to spread the message. The panchayats, right? They can make announcements, or they can ensure that they spread the message through pamphlets, through door-to-door announcements, and ensure that people are aware, they're trained, and they don't step out and take unnecessary risks during a lightning alert. So center has argued that there is no need to notify lightning as a disaster. So it's not a notified disaster in India. But states don't agree with this. They are demanding the center to notify it as a disaster so that they can draw funds from SDRF and at least compensate the victims. Understood? So this completes my discussion on all the natural disasters. We have covered all natural hazards comprehensively. So now I would like to take up some questions if you have any doubts, and then I'll head to the last part, which is industrial disasters and man-made disasters. We'll take a brief look at man-made disasters. This is the last topic under this module, and tomorrow we will take up the next module. All right. So please go ahead. Let me know any questions, any doubts. SMEs, please push them into the dismiss section. Let's see some questions, and for a few more minutes, we can continue with man-made disasters. Sachin is asking, sir, why specifically in most cases the East Coast encounters more calamities than West Coast? It's because of the geography of East Coast of India, where it is located, its proximity to Bay of Bengal, right? So it's the geography of East Coast of India which makes it more prone to these disasters. Kajal is asking, why does snow-covered Himalayas in Uttarakhand catch forest fires? See, snow cover is not present throughout the year, right? Particularly in lower Himalayas, the summer season would have melted all the snow as well. Sometimes there are areas which does not witness any snowfall. So you do have dry forests available even in Uttarakhand, parts of Himachal Pradesh, even in Jammu and Kashmir, which do catch fire during summer season. Santosh is asking, if COVID-19 is a natural epidemic, then why China didn't disclose information to WHO? Because China was trying to protect its image. It was trying to conceal this from the world, and it was trying to protect its image. Then it realized it's out of control, and then it acknowledged the threat and started sharing some information. Vaishna is asking why IMD is the nodal agency for all other disasters but INCOI is for tsunami. That's because IMD deals with all meteorological phenomena and as well as seismic activity. That's why IMD is responsible only for them. For tsunamis, you need different expertise, which IMD does not have. You have to be a specialist in oceanic studies, which INCOIS has. That's why INCOIS has been made the nodal agency, not IMD. Parveen is asking, sir, in a forest area, if trees are cut illegally, then what action is taken by the government? According to the law, very strict action will be taken in notified forest areas and in protected areas. If trees are cut illegally by poachers, right, it invokes the provisions of the Wildlife Protection Act, Environment Protection Act, and it involves even a jail term. These are very strict provisions we have to protect our forest areas. Santosh is asking how poaching of wildlife can cause forest fires. That's because hunters and poachers, they set fire when they are hunting. Animals are very scared of fire. So to scare the animal and to pull the animal in the direction of the hunter, they deliberately set fire to corner the animal and push them towards the hunters so they can easily target the animal. So these fires, they go uncontrolled and they spread very quickly. So hunters and poachers are contributing to forest fires. And also since they largely reside in forest areas for few days when they go hunting and poaching, they stay there, they put fires to cook food, to warm themselves. And if they don't put out the fire properly, that could also trigger a forest fire. Vijay is asking how landslide and floods are caused by forest fire. Then Vijay, you haven't attended the previous classes. That's why you are asking this question. I told you because of forest fire, the soil gets degraded. Degraded soil is vulnerable for landslide and floods. Please go back and read what we have discussed in previous classes. Vipul is asking, is government also indulging in clearing forests in the name of forest fires? Yes, sometimes governments also promote deforestation for the sake of industrialization, urbanization, and other economic activities. Governments also promote deforestation and setting forest fires. Akhil is asking, what is invasive alien species? This is an environment topic. I can give you a brief idea. As I told you, invasive alien species refers to a non-native species. A species which is not native to that environment, to that ecosystem. Let's say there is a plant or a fish in South America or in Africa. It's not found in India at all, naturally. But because of trade, because of exports and imports and human movement, someone might have introduced a alien plant or an animal or a species into the non-native environment. So that is the alien species which has come in from the outside. Some alien species, they are so dominant that they spread very quickly in the ecosystem. That's called an invasive alien species. They spread so quickly that they take over the nutrients, the resources, and all the wealth that is available in the ecosystem, and they create a scarcity for other native species. So, invasive alien species is a threat to the native species of flora and fauna. It affects biodiversity. So, as biodiversity weakens, the ecosystem becomes vulnerable for forest fires. Payal is asking, please explain why lightning is not considered as a disaster by the center. It's because the central government believes that lightning deaths can be tackled. We can prevent it through better awareness and training because alerts and early warning is available. So based on this logic, center has said we will not notify lightning as a disaster. Shaimil is asking how land grabbing causes forest fire. When land is being grabbed by industries, by farmers, or by those who are expanding cities, like real estate construction mafia, right? They clear the forest land by setting fire to it. They deforest the forest land by setting fire to it. So land grabbing contributes to forest fires. Sir, volcanoes can occur through man-made causes. No, not possible. It's impossible for volcanoes to be man-made. I think Prashant has a question. Let's see where his question is. Prashant, if possible, please try to post your question again. Vijay says recent chemical explosion by a train accident in US caused a forest fire. Yeah, he's referring to a recent disaster in the US, which was a man-made disaster. There was a train accident, a train derailed, leading to a chemical leakage. That itself was a concern because it was a toxic chemical. And this also contributed to a fire in the region, a forest fire in the region. So that's clearly a man-made cause. Dheeraj is asking, why don't northern parts of the world experience tsunamis? If you're referring to the topmost part of the northern hemisphere, such as northern Atlantic, the Arctic, etc., that's because there the fault lines are pretty stable. The tectonic movement is not so active, right? That's why they don't experience tsunamis there. Tsunamis occur wherever you have a very active fault line, like the Circum-Pacific Belt, the Pacific Ring of Fire, the Alp-Himalayan Belt, the Transatlantic Ridge, the Indian Ocean Ridge. That's where you witness earthquakes and volcanoes, which causes tsunamis. Okay, last question. Prashant is asking, what is zombie virus? I think that's the question he's asking. Yeah. See, I told you that in our polar ice caps, in glaciers, we have a number of viruses, age-old viruses that have been frozen permanently. Since millions of years, there are few pathogens and viruses which are frozen permanently in permafrost conditions like Siberia, in Arctic ice, in Antarctic polar caps, in the Himalayan glaciers. They have never been released for millions of years. Now, because of global warming, the ice is melting and the viruses could get activated again, right? So these are called zombie viruses. Just like zombies come back to life, these viruses could come back to life, which are age-old viruses that could devastate human beings and other life forms. So there is concern about rise of zombie viruses creating the next pandemic because of global warming. Okay. I tried taking as many questions as possible. Now let's continue for 10 more minutes. Today I'll be ending a little early because we have a webinar as well, if you guys remember, right? The weekly Thursday webinar starting at 8:30. So since I'll be taking it, I'll end the session few minutes before. Around 8:20 we'll wrap up and rest we can continue tomorrow. I'll just give you an introduction to industrial disasters. Maybe we can talk about the causes for industrial disasters and then we can wrap up for today. With regard to industrial accidents, disasters, etc., there could be natural causes responsible as well. Right? We've already studied this. If you remember, I kept pointing out under every disaster that disasters like earthquakes, tsunamis, floods, etc., they can all cause industrial disasters. Earthquake can cause a major toxic gas leakage in a chemical plant. Right? If there is a massive earthquake and the factory suffers damage and collapses, right? Toxic gas might leak out. Or a tsunami striking a nuclear plant can cause a nuclear accident, right? So there are natural hazards which cause industrial disasters. Apart from that, industrial accidents and disasters are entirely man-made. It's either due to accidental technical failure over a period of time due to wear and tear, equipment might start failing, and there might be a genuine accident where no single person is responsible for it, but it's a genuine accident which has happened. Or it occurs due to negligence by the owners, by the management, negligence by the workers, where protocols have not been followed, safety protocols have been ignored. Is that clear? For example, factory owners have an incentive to not comply with the SOPs, the standard operating procedures or standard operating protocols. For example, there will be government rules regarding servicing, maintenance and replacement of equipment. But owners and the management, they try to save money by not getting the equipment serviced. They might delay servicing. Periodic servicing might be delayed. Maintenance could be compromised. They may not follow the right protocols for maintaining delicate, sensitive equipment in order to save costs or to save time or just out of sheer negligence. And even for replacing spare parts, certain factories and industries might delay this in order to protect their profit margin and in order to reduce their investments. So this is nothing but an act of pure negligence, which is ignorance of the SOPs and the protocols that causes these disasters and accidents. So poor maintenance, servicing, the lack of replacement of the spare parts, they could cause major disasters in industries and factories. Then this could also occur due to sabotage, which is a deliberate act. Maybe terrorists could do this. Terrorists could carry out a sabotage in order to cause a bigger attack. They might target a chemical plant, a toxic industry to kill a large number of people through a terror attack. Or maybe a disgruntled employee, workers who have not been satisfied, who have not been paid properly, who are not happy with the working conditions, who have a grudge against the owner, who have been laid off, who haven't got their pay, someone who's unhappy, the worker who has the knowledge, right? They might deliberately sabotage the equipment to cause an accident. Or it could be just miscreants. Some miscreants, just for the sake of it, the fun of it, they might sabotage the equipment deliberately, causing an accident. So these are the different causes for industrial disasters and accidents. There are natural causes. All the natural disasters can cause industrial accidents. There could be a genuine accident due to technical failure, or due to negligence by the workers, owners, or management, where there is poor maintenance, where they have ignored safety protocols, not carried out servicing, poor maintenance, and not replacing spare parts, or due to sabotage because of terrorism or through disgruntled workers or through miscreants. This is the primary cause for industrial disasters and accidents, which is a type of man made disaster. Now, the question is, which industry is at the highest risk? In which industry do you witness these kind of accidents? In which industry can you witness the risk for such industrial accidents and disasters? In any industry, wherever there is very high temperature and pressure conditions, where high temperature pressure is being used through geysers, boilers, furnaces, they are highly prone to explosions. All right. For example, thermal power industry, where coal is burnt to generate steam, which is at very high temperature, high pressure. These boilers or the furnaces could explode. The pipes might explode, killing several workers on site. In metallurgical industries, the same disasters can happen, right? To work with metal, high pressure, high temperature conditions are needed that are generated through industrial boilers and furnaces. These massive industrial geysers and boilers, if they explode, right, they release tremendous heat and force which can kill all the workers present on site. We have had many such incidents happening in India. The NTPC itself, National Thermal Power Corporation, has suffered from many boiler explosions, killing several workers. Several metallurgical factories and industries have seen boiler explosions, furnace related accidents that has killed many workers in our country. All right. Then, in general, hazardous industries, working with hazardous equipment like toxic chemicals, explosives, then toxic and synthetic raw materials, like for example, fertilizer industry, pesticide industry, right? Then mining industry, also firecrackers. So wherever such toxic, hazardous substances, raw materials, explosives are used, all those industries and factories are vulnerable. Is that clear? That is why in India, there is a very strict legal framework for safety regulation in our industries and factories. All right. We have several laws in our country. We have a set of laws in our country focused on implementing and enforcing safety standards. In fact, the central government and state governments, they both have the authority to issue licenses, to issue and even renew licenses following an inspection of the plant. Inspectors will visit these factories and plants and have to get the required approvals and permissions before getting the license, before renewing the license. Only those industries and factories which meet the safety protocols and standards, only they can be issued licenses through the government. All right. So we have a very strong legal framework. Problem is in enforcement. There is very poor enforcement on the ground, mainly due to corruption. The inspectors, who are government officials, along with politicians who are close to the industry, who are close to industrialists, they take bribes from them and they bypass the safety standards and still issue licenses to them. Even if they are not carrying out servicing and maintenance, even if they are not replacing spare parts on time, even if they are breaching the safety standards and protocols, even if they are not giving the basic protection for their workers, still the authorities will give them licenses, allow them to continue to operate. That's a prime reason why these laws are not being enforced strictly. It's due to corruption at the ground level. We have Explosives Act, Factories Act, Environment Protection Act, Public Liability Insurance Act, Petroleum Act, Insecticides Act, Motor Vehicles Act with regard to accidents, and Disaster Management Act. These are the 8 laws we have that deals with industrial accidents and disasters and man-made disasters. Is that clear? For example, under Environment Protection Act, polluter pays principle has been introduced. The polluter should pay, should take the liability. There is a Public Liability Insurance Act where the accused who is guilty of negligence or sabotage is held liable for the damage and should pay compensation. All right. And under Factories Act, Explosives Act, Petroleum Act, Insecticides Act, there are a lot of safety standards which are mandatory for the industry to follow. But unfortunately, there is a gap in enforcement due to corruption at the ground level. All right. So on this note, let's close the discussion for today. This is enough for now. Tomorrow, we are left with the last module and a small discussion on CBRN disasters. I'll start with man-made disasters again tomorrow because we are left with a small part. Few minutes, we'll have a discussion on that and CBRN disasters. And after that, we'll be starting with the next module, the last module, which completes our syllabus for disaster management. All right. So that is it for today. Thanks for watching. I hope you guys have understood everything. Tomorrow we'll meet again. Let me know if you have any questions. And let's wrap up the syllabus and look at some previous questions in the last class. All right. So see you tomorrow. And if you guys are attending the webinar, of course, I'll see you back in 10 minutes. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.